Okay, good morning and welcome to the October 1st, 2020 Council meeting, the Algonquin Highlands. I will call the meeting to order. Our regular clerk, Dawn, is away on a course today, so Angie Bird, our CAO and Deputy Clerk, is back in the saddle for clerking today. So welcome to Angie in that role.
Thank you.
May I have a roll call, please?
Councillor Shortreed.
Present.
Councillor Dayu.
Present.
Councillor Barry.
Present.
Deputy Mayor Danielson.
Present.
Mayor Moffat.
And present. Thank you. May I have a mover and a seconder to approve the agenda, please? Councillors Barry and Dayu, thank you.
Moved by Councillor Barry, seconded by Councillor Dayu. Be it resolved that Council approves the October 1st, 2020 agenda as circulated.
All in favor? That's carried. Thank you. Are there any disclosures of pecuniary interest today? Seeing none, may I have a mover and a seconder to adopt the minutes of the previous meeting? Councillor Shortreed, Deputy Mayor Danielson.
Moved by Councillor Shortreed, seconded by Deputy Mayor Danielson. Be it resolved that Council approves the September 17th, 2020 regular Council meeting minutes as circulated.
All in favor? That's carried. Thank you. Number 6 and 7, public meetings and delegations. There are none. We have one of our big picture list discussions is up next. I believe Adam and Chris are going to come in and join us. So we'll just wait till they pop onto the screen. Good morning, Mr. Thorne and Mr. Card.
Good morning.
Good morning, Mayor Council.
So this is a bit of a free-flowing conversation. So I did share with Council some working notes that I had crafted to sort of put my thoughts and things that I've heard from Council over the many years on paper. And I don't know if Adam and Chris have received those. So what we had decided to do as part of this docks and landings discussion is there's a number of issues that over many, many years have come up. And they are starting to sort of like planets. They're starting to align in a variety of ways. So I don't know that there's any big decisions being sought today. This is, as I mentioned, it's more to set our respective mental tables as we move toward publicly discussing. We've received for review the asset management plan. We'll be talking about that at our next meeting. And there are a variety of implications around what over the years, we've determined is access to water. So access to water has become a bit of a challenge in many ways. And so this conversation is meant to address a number of those issues. There are two issues that are separate that were included. One of them is docks on municipal land, and the other one is docks that are across roadways. I wouldn't mind if Council came to some conclusion on those because they have potential policy implications. And if we could provide some direction for staff, if there is any to be had, that would be great. But in terms of the greater sort of docks and landings discussion, we have a lot ahead in terms of, let's say, the asset management plan projects and priorities and some other processes that we go through. So we are talking about the big picture of how the township is growing. Haliburton County is seeing growth or has seen growth greater than the provincial average in the last census. We are seeing a greater increase in people attending and staying longer at cottages due to COVID-19, and we don't know if that's a permanent, going to be a permanent development for our community. The availability of high-speed broadband is still a challenge, but it's getting better, which allows people to stay longer and work and play from home. And needs are changing. As more people are spending more time here, they're starting to ask different questions about what the township does and doesn't provide, what it should provide, what are core services. And so we're the people that have to make those decisions. And we are experiencing an increased demand for some of those services. And while the asset management plan will certainly tell us what needs to be done first, second, third, and fourth, it will be up to Council following discussions like this that are able to say how those things will get done. And is there room for any any modification of how those services are provided to accommodate more needs across more departments. So if it's okay with council, I wanted to start with the idea of docks on municipal land. Again, it is access to water, and so what that means is that over a number of years, there have been instances where non-waterfront property owners have just simply found municipal land and installed docks and have enjoyed the waterfront throughout the summer. And in the fall, they take their docks away, but they don't live near the area and they don't pay waterfront taxes. So these are usually at the end of township-owned road allowances. And one of the perfect examples that we have had a lot of discussion about, and there's been a number of complaints about, is at the end of Dawson Road on Maple Lake as one example. And so folks have, because it is where the road comes down and meets the lake, people have put out docks. There have unfortunately been some circumstances where people trying to just, take little kids there or something have been told to leave because it's been private property, and it's not. It's public land, which makes those docks public as well. And there's been a bit of confusion around that. So the bigger picture around that is that, should that be allowed? Are there implications? Are there challenges? How does that blend or not blend with our collective desire to improve naturalized shorelines where we can, and what potential outcomes for that kind of situation could be? And it doesn't only happen at the end of Dawson Road on Maple Lake. It happens other places. So that was the first thing I wanted to broach with council, and looking for certainly thoughts. Adam and Chris can jump in anytime if there's been any challenges around those kinds of things, but looking for just a general discussion from council on that idea and what the township's position might and could be going forward and to address situations like this. I think I see Liz's hand up, but there you go, her name's in the way, so I can only see fingers. Liz, go ahead, please.
Nothing like starting with the most difficult part of the conversation, and this is a real tough one. I guess obviously our biggest concern is going to be our liability associated with all of the structures that are in place, and I'm concerned about the legality of us having kind of accepted their presence for too long. Giving them some legitimacy. I know that there's going to have to be some of the structures removed in order for us to do work on, for instance, North Shore Road. But and North Shore Road is a big issue, but it's not the only one. So I don't want to completely focus on that. So I'm kind of thinking that there may be some places where they have to be removed. But for structures that have been in place for a long time, I'm thinking maybe what we need to do is determine some criteria about their placement and enter into some form of agreement with anyone who's got a structure on land that belongs to the township. That's just my starting thought.
So are you thinking more of folks who have a road between their home and the water, and they have a gazebo and stairs and that kind of thing? Because what I'm talking about right now is just simply where people who don't live anywhere near the area have just put docks out and are using them as their own docks.
Well, I mean, that for sure. People who don't live anywhere near the area, Dawson Road is a bit of a unique situation, and brings with it multiple problems because, as we've seen in the last little while, where people are parking, it's just not on. They're parking on corners of roads and curves where, making some dangerous spots. So I'm thinking more, when talking about some form of legal agreement for those folks who live across the road from a water body, and set out some criteria that falls in line with what we're thinking about including in the shoreline preservation bylaw. We certainly have to do something about the properties that just seem to, I want a better view, so I think I'll go and cut down all the stability on the riverbank. We really do need to, that's where enforcement comes into it. And I think we need to be stricter about that.
So the second topic that I wanted to separate out is the docks across the road or structures across the road. So for the purposes of this one, I just want to stick with docks that are on municipal land where there is no adjacent property ownership. If we can just separate those out, because I think they have some similarities, but I think they need to be considered differently. And I see Councillor Dayu has a hand up.
It does get sticky because there are also docks and boats that are cached on municipal land for water access only taxpayers. So, their land isn't adjacent to that space. They do pay taxes in Algonquin Highlands, but does that mean that someone who lives on, a piece of property that isn't waterfront, but also pays taxes in Algonquin Highlands can't have a dock there or a boat cached there? Why, I'm not advocating for one or the other. I'm just thinking about how sticky it does get. If they were allowed to stay, who would have the right or retain the right to maintain one, and who wouldn't? And is it about proximity? Is it about being a tax-paying member of our community? What, where do we draw the line, and then how do we monitor that line? I don't know. Don't have the answer.
Yeah, I mean, to me, we addressed a little bit of this this and the next issue. I don't know, Angie might know, 6 years ago, or Lisa and Liz were both on council then.
Mm-hmm.
It was more about the docks that are docks and buildings that are across the road from a water adjacent property owner. So boats that are cached for use by water access property owners, to me is not included in this conversation at all, because they're waterfront property owners. This is where people who are not waterfront property owners are just finding a piece of municipal land and enjoying waterfront as if it was their own. And in fact, in some cases, telling others it's private property and they can't use it. So I personally think that is not acceptable, and that we have beaches and public access points for those purposes. And the places where there are those kinds of docks at the ends of road allowances, in my opinion, should be removed in terms of an equitability for waterfront taxation purposes and conflict. We have that's why this conversation could take us all day, because we have a lot of sticky bits to try and separate out. And I think there are very much differences between someone just deciding to stick a dock on the end of a road allowance and put their boat there and their slide and bring the family and picnic all day. But they can go to Elvin Johnson Park. So does that mean that anywhere now where there's a road allowance, now that we've talked about this publicly, is someone going to say, oh, I'm going to put a dock there and park my car on the road and enjoy it all day? And does that mean that someone's going to come and build a gazebo, their own gazebo and picnic area in one of our parks because it's public land? Like, public land is public land, but it's municipally owned, but it doesn't mean that it's publicly available for unfettered use. And I think there are some liability challenges and some equity challenges that need to be considered around that. I think I saw Liz's hand, and I certainly see Lisa's. Liz, were you first there?
I do. I think I agree that we really do need to take some serious action about people who are not waterfront property owners. They're not water adjacent owners, and they're installing docks sort of wherever they like on municipal land. We really do need to deal with that and put a stop to it. Or anybody can put a dock anywhere. I just wanted to comment on the water access only properties. Presently, we have an agreement or a requirement when people are asking to develop water access only properties that they must find their own parking and boat storage. So I think that can kind of separate that discussion out. That might change, but I see that as being a separate discussion.
And Lisa, I think you were up next.
Yeah, I definitely agree that something needs to be done on people that are putting docks anywhere. I mean, really, that could be even non-taxpayers. It could be someone from another municipality that's doing that. My question is, have we put any docks in those situations, like all of those docks that are appearing, the township had nothing to do with any of those docks, correct?
No, it didn't. No.
So, and then my second question is are people, do we know, are people using boat launches as water, like for swimming, or are we just using things like Elvin Johnson Park?
No, people use boat launches for swimming. Absolutely. Not often, but
Yeah.
I certainly see it on beach. It's a very active boat launch, and there are people who will go there for a swim. And I think I see Jen nodding, so it must happen other places that she's aware of as well. Jen, can you speak to that a little bit?
Yeah, it's been a growing concern up here at Oxtongue in particular, Oxtongue being right off of Highway 60, and we get a lot of day trippers coming through, and they head along Harris Road and they see the boat launch and they stop and they picnic there because it's, you know, it's a lovely place, and who wouldn't want to stop and picnic there? But then the litter is left, et cetera. Some of them get a little bit further down where there's a very small public beach, and they use that space. And so it's happened there. It's happened on Otter. What I found in chatting with reps from the lakes in Ward 3 is that and this is logical, that the lakes that are closer to large thoroughfares do tend to get a lot more of the intermittent use than the lakes that are further up. Crown, Wolf Lake, they're really not seeing it. Trout spawn a tiny little bit, but certainly, you know, otter, hardwood, perhaps a bit less. But in any event, the ones that are closer to the major thoroughfares are really experiencing that.
Yeah, and I think we also want to be careful not to be, this is not a discussion about, you know, how do we become the big meanies and shut everybody out. It's a matter of understanding what use is occurring in those areas and coming up with some policy-based solutions to address them. Certainly, it would be very easy to say, for example, and, you know, we've had a lot of concerns about the spot down Harris Road there, Councillor Dayu, and well, the easy answer is just push out some parking spaces and put some garbage cans there. Well, now staff have, now there's one more place to maintain. So we always have to balance those things one off the other. And but we've been seeing that, and I know both Adam and Chris, I think, have attended various places where people cut trees for firewood, and so there are some unfortunate and unacceptable things happening around these access points that are different than just docks for summer use. But we can see over time, the last, I don't know, it's got to be six years or so, I think, that these access points, access to water is becoming more desirable and less available. And so people are trying to get it where they can. So I think what I'm hearing on this particular issue is that there's certainly a lot more conversation to have, but I don't know if Chris or Adam wanted to weigh in from their respective areas, but it sounds to me like there's maybe a little bit of potential policy development to be considered and brought back, because there's a lot of implications around enforcement and liability, as Liz mentioned, and some other issues. Lisa?
I think another big issue of consideration too is that we are trying to work with naturalizing shorelines. There's a lot of lakes that now are at capacity. You know, we want to have an environmental point of view as well as like an equitable point of view. I think those are considerations as well.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point, and I thought about that when we were going through the line by line draft review of the shoreline bylaw at the county table, where Liz is the warden. And one of the questions that's been asked a number of times is, well, what are municipalities going to do their part to assist in shoreline preservation? And this conversation was coming, and I thought it was timely. That question was timely, just as Lisa, as you just said, because there are considerations. So what can we do? Some of the questions were around road salt, plowing and that kind of thing. But definitely if there are places where shoreline is being degraded by overuse by the public, and we are committed through various initiatives of preserving shorelines, then it makes sense here as well. Lisa, go ahead.
Yeah, and just to add to that, you know, if our lakes and that are degraded because of overuse and improper use, no one will be using the lakes anyway because they'll be degraded.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, lake health certainly is also, to use Councillor Dayu's word, is also a bit sticky, because there are lots of people who are could be contributing to degrading lakes who are full-on waterfront property owners. So we also need to be careful that degradation of lake health happens across the board by all manner of folks. So we don't want to label anybody, but it's definitely a good consideration. So would that suffice for now? I mean, we're just kind of sort of doing touch and goes on some of these things, just to say that there's interest in looking into this further and seeing what the options and implications are, and if there's some policy development to be discussed. Would council say yes on that, and then we can turn it back to staff for something to look at. Madam CAO Clerk.
Thank you. I think for this particular policy development, we would hand this one to the planner. And he is watching and listening to council's comments. So rather than have Chris or Adam do this one, it would be Sean that would do it.
Okay.
Okay.
I think Chris had his hand up.
Chris, did you have your hand up?
Yes, thank you. I just wanted to add that one thing I have been getting, and it's becoming more frequent, is people calling just simply to ask whether or not they can use boat launches to go swimming or picnicking. And then on the flip side, we have several situations where adjacent property owners to boat launches have expressed concern over increased use at those boat launches, where not only are people swimming, but it's becoming quite a popular location for people to do so. And adjacent property owners talking about, parking and access issues, noise. And then I've also had situations where boat launch users have expressed some challenges associated with using the launch itself due to a number of people using it for swimming, and then some conflicts arising between the two groups. So just something to add to that thought.
Yeah, that's good. And so maybe then part of the bigger picture view of this is to, we have a number of parks that are on water, that certainly Alvin Johnson Park is very popular. We have two little parks up on the Hawk Valley Parks, and they have had some enhancements. And so maybe part of that conversation is looking at making some smaller enhancements to the parks and promoting them better. So if folks are looking for a place to swim and have a picnic, we have them. Go here. Like, let's direct people and promote better what we already have in place. So those are some options. The Parkette at Dorset, it's very popular, has picnic tables and whatnot. So that could also be part of that whole development as well. I think Adam had his hand up. Mr. Thorne?
Yes, thank you. In regards to roads and public works, what I see or have seen over the past couple of years is the infrastructure that is being built on road shore allowance along the edges of, as an example, North Shore Road. So the handrails and the gazebos and a lot of digging out of the shoulder of the road to install stairs. That can happen over the course of a weekend, and then all of a sudden, boom, there's something there. So that increase we have really noticed when it comes to winter plowing. Those things get hidden in the snowbanks, and then our machinery goes through and gets caught up in them. So not only a safety factor for our crews on the road, but also bank stabilization, things of that nature is what we've started to see. And North Shore Road as the example, because that's the one that's jumping out at me the most, just given the current situation. A lot of these slump sections that we're dealing with are a result of high water levels, the water crashing against the bank, but also the infrastructure that was in place. So in some locations, it has been removed. Other locations, unfortunately, new items have been put in place. So although I understand people want to get down to the water and they want to do it safely and they want to enjoy it, it does have its challenging points for us.
Yeah, it does. And I'm just gonna push pause on you for a minute, Adam, because I'm just gonna back up to Lisa, because what you're talking about is our next topic. So I just want to finish up with the docks on municipal land, but not on the roadways. I'm talking about at the end of road allowances, and other places where some have been snuck in. I think Lisa, you had your hand up. Did you want to have a final word on that?
No, that's
okay. All right, thank you. So in terms of in terms of docks on municipal land, primarily at the ends of road allowances, we'll give that back to staff, particularly Sean, to give that some consideration, and we'll see something come forward on that. Is that correct, Madam CAO?
Yes, and just so we know which direction council's most interested in looking at the removal of those structures and how we might do that.
That's what I heard. I think it's problematic enough that that needs to be explored, and let's not kid ourselves. There will be pushback on this particular issue, and so, but we can't. I don't think we can go any further in the conversation until we have the information from staff, the planning issues, the legal issues, land use issues. Councillor Dayu.
If I could just reiterate what you yourself have said, Madam Mayor, and also Councillor Barry, I think the shoreline preservation element here is really important. And when staff come back with some thoughts, perhaps they could include the shoreline preservation element. Maybe when those structures are removed, there is some mitigating effort that can be done to support the shoreline. I'm not sure. I throw it to the staff to think about.
Yeah, thank you. And I think that is this is why our agenda is a little short today, because this topic really has so many moving parts to it that we could talk about it forever. All right, we'll leave that with staff, and we'll see what comes back from that. So then next is the one about the idea of docks that are on shorelines that are across a roadway, and they are technically considered water adjacent properties. So these are properties where, and we have thousands of them, where one of our roads goes between the lake and the house. They are technically considered water adjacent. The last time we had a conversation about this, circling back to what Adam was talking about, challenges with infrastructure and road slumping and people, as Liz said, people cutting trees for a better view. All of that happens on land that they do not own, but they have been using it that way for generations. And so some of the challenges are that some properties, according to MPAC, are considered water adjacent, and yet some of those are considered waterfront. So there are some people who are paying waterfront taxes on a waterfront that they don't own. So there's a few more muddying factors around this. And so over generations, as Adam said, there's decks, docks, gazebos, pump houses, and they've always been there. As time's gone by, we've had 2 or 3 instances where, as Liz mentioned, somebody just decided the trees are too big and they cut them all down, and that impedes the road bed. In a lot of places, these are not shore road allowances that can be purchased because they are actually the road bed, the road allowance for our road. And as Adam mentioned, there's challenges with damage to the road bed, which causes slumping, and then we have further challenges with having to repair those roads or rebuild them. So I guess the question is, are these problematic? What are the problems? Solutions, education, enforcement, just a big picture of how we work with these situations to make it a better situation. Councillor Barry.
And to complicate things, there are properties using North Shore again that are able to buy the shoreline there, correct? Like some places they can't, some places they can.
That's correct. And so there are places, as I mentioned, where there's the shore allowance, the 66-foot frontage, as most people call it. In many places, it can be purchased, but there are, I wouldn't know how many, but there are lots of places where you can't buy it because it's not a shore road allowance; it's our road allowance. Mm-hmm. And there's some very narrow, steep landscape to the lake, and on that's what Adam's saying is stairs go down. And there's very rarely, if ever, a permit. We don't know if they're built to code. A lot of things have just been there forever. I know a couple of years ago, the bylaw officers talked to a property owner that built a deck, and it was so poorly built, it had to be removed because it was not built anywhere near the code. So we have an obligation to uphold those portions of the work we do as well. So I think what we talked about last time, and Angie, you can fill me in or remind me. I think we talked about focusing the conversation on their permitting that kind of infrastructure in front of the property to which you are adjacent. So again, it kind of connects back to the previous conversation where you can't just go and put a dock anywhere you want, but there are permissions or opportunities for finding a working model for the infrastructure either that already exists or that may exist in the future. And we need to make sure that the cutting of trees and brush vegetation, again, is important to the shoreline health. And there has to be a balance there between having a nice view and not cutting trees on land you don't own. That and cutting trees on land you don't own, that also might undermine the roadbed that costs tons of money to replace and fix. So it's a bit of the house that Jack built. So I guess the opportunities are potential policy implications about how we would address this. And Liz, you mentioned this in the very beginning. There are people that have infrastructure on North Shore Road that are going to have to remove it because we need to fix the road. So what are we going to do? What are we going to do then? And there are situations like this at Oxtongue and Halls Lake and all kinds of places where this situation exists. We can leave it alone, or we could try and refine it in some way. Deputy Mayor Danielson.
There's absolutely no question that we're going to run into some difficulties over this, and we just have to gird ourselves, strengthen ourselves for those arguments, because it's reached a point where we need to do something. A couple of points. I really think that we, despite how tough it is, talk about difficult situations, changing anything that's associated with MPAC. I do believe that it's worthy of at least trying to have a discussion with them about the water adjacent versus waterfront taxation categories. And I mean, some of these properties are not waterfront. They're not on the water. To me, a waterfront property is somewhere where you can walk down your property and walk into the water, not across a road. So, I might be off base, or that might be a hopeless case, but to me, because they are creating part of the problem, that it's worthy of a discussion there. As to what we're going to do with people who have structures there, to me, I think we need to work on trying to develop some sort of permitting system that's got specific criteria to it that might match up with the shoreline preservation bylaw, or I should say draft shoreline preservation bylaw. And it's obviously going to have enforcement implications, but I think that that's something that we're seeing kind of across the board. Like the whole issue of enforcement is another blue sky discussion for us to have, particularly at budget time. But some form of permitting system, with specific criteria, I think might help us a lot and help people to understand what they can or cannot do going forward.
Yeah, another fly in the ointment is that some of these particular properties may be identified. The CIO and the former planning administrator noted that some of these properties may be considered waterfront in the official plan, and therefore waterfront policies apply to their development. And we may not be coloring inside our own lines in some places, and what are the potential implications about that going forward. So there's lots to discuss. I see Lisa's hand and Jen's hand. Lisa, can you go ahead, please?
I agree with Councillor or Deputy Mayor Danielson about the permit process. I think that's a way of working with people instead of, outlawing infrastructure that has been created without our consent. I think permitting, I'd like to see an idea of how we could talk about that.
Yeah, or maybe license of occupation. We had talked about that at our last time around, and it admittedly didn't go over very well. So as Liz says, gird your loins. Councillor Dayu and then Councillor Shortreed.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more with Deputy Mayor Danielson. I think it's important that it is established quite clearly in modern times that there is no right to this property if you buy a piece of land which is adjacent to a road, which is adjacent to waterfront, and the permitting system would just help to clarify that. I also think it's an excellent opportunity to consider shoreline preservation again here, and I think we can really excel as a township in making sure that becomes a very clear part of our expectation. If you wish to use this land, here are the standards that we're going to expect, and it's for your own benefit. It's for the health of your lake. A lot of these places, you can see the staircases go down, and they're cheek by jowl. They're literally boom, 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 one after the other, and it's such a vital opportunity to try to restore some balance and some health to that ecosystem. I know the Love Your Lakes program says that a lake isn't thriving unless 75% of the shoreline is naturalized. And wow, if we could even get a meter or two of some vegetation or whatever it might be in those spaces as part of the condition for having a right to put your dock there, then we're ahead. We're definitely ahead. So yeah, I'm completely behind that.
Great, thank you. And Councillor Shortreed.
Jen just said everything I said, and I think also that it will prevent future problems with the road and the safety of the road crews going out there if we have specific terms that they have to agree to and abide by.
Well, one of the challenges too, I'm sure Adam might be able to speak to this, if somebody builds, this seems to be the year of the stairs. But if somebody's building stairs and the plow comes along and knocks them down, then they call the township and shout at us, the plow driver knocked their stairs down, but we didn't know they were there and they're not on their own land. So it just becomes this really unfortunate circular argument of finger pointing, and I understand it. And so how do we address that as well? I saw a hand, I see Councillor Dayus and the CAOs, but Councillor Dayu, go ahead.
The question I think I would have is, what about those properties where in order to access that staircase, you've got to go over the railing? And if we're offering a permit system, what implications would there be for folks who say, yeah, but you know, I've got to step over this railing, and if you're going to offer me access to that land, then you're not really offering me access to that land. And maybe that wouldn't become a thing, but I wonder. So
there's actually, we have experience in that a number of years ago. Due to a complaint, the MTO was brought in. This situation occurs on Highway 35 at Halls Lake, where one of our staff members lives, and also further up on the top end of Cushog and part, I don't think it was into St. Nora. And due to a complaint, the MTO was notified, and the MTO did a sweep of exactly those properties because it was their property and their road allowance, and they required removal of all infrastructure off of their shoreline, but they didn't do it everywhere. So some of those places still exist, but they did do quite a sweep along that, and that was very angst filled, and a lot of people were very upset. But there are people who, yeah, they're crossing a highway, stepping over a guardrail, going down their homemade stairs and going out on the dock. That is MTO territory and it's not ours. So that would, I don't know that we would, poke that hornet's nest. We would leave that to the MTO to manage themselves. And there are places where shorelines are crown. And so that would also be, those would be provincial issues as well. I think we have to sweep our own house first. Deputy Mayor Danielson.
I was just thinking about the something that will come at us probably before anything else is when we do the road work on North Shore Road, people are going to be asked or told, and I think they may have already received some notification that it's coming, looming, if they have to remove their infrastructure, that they may not be able to replace it as it is, that we need to set out some criteria that for under a permitting system that will work for everyone, and that includes the people that may have to make some changes to what they've got in place, for us, in order for us to maintain stability, bank stability, and no interference with the plows and equipment, things like that.
Mm-hmm, absolutely. Madam CAO, is your hand in the air there?
Yes, thank you. I'm just wondering, when staff brings something back, is council interested in seeing the possibility of permitting for structures that are being grandfathered? So permitting all structures that are there now, or permitting them based on that they bring them up to code, because many won't be, or removal of some that are not up to code. Like, there's a lot of options there.
Well, that makes it even more complicated, doesn't it? Deputy Mayor Danielson, you go ahead.
I think that they have to be up to code. or we're right back into the liability circumstance. And I know that that's a hardship, or it's going to be tough for people to accept. But I remember having a discussion with one of our bylaw officials in a circumstance where I believe a permit was issued for a structure that was on the shore road allowance. And the response was, well, we want to make sure that if there is going to be something built there, that it's to code, that it's safe. And to me, we really do need to have some emphasis on that for everyone's safety. I mean, that somebody could build a set of stairs that is not up to code, it's home built, and they fall down them, and the insurance company will sue us. And it'll all be about not just our allowing it to be there, but about how it was built and the building code. And I know that there's going to be some definitely ruffled feathers, but I think if people understand what we're trying to do, hopefully over time they'll accept our approach.
Yeah, and when we had our discussion about this, I think it was, I'm not sure, 6 years ago-ish, I received a call from an irate gentleman who was told he couldn't build. He wanted to replace a finger dock, and he wanted to build a big thing. And his question of me was, the building official said that he couldn't build a big deck there, and he wanted to know that if when his granddaughter fell down the township's rocky shore, if he sued me first or the township first. So that's out there. And first of all, that was just an unkind thing to say. But that's what we have to balance, is what is the liability, and how do we balance what's already there. Councillor Dayu and then Councillor Berry, I think. You need to unmute yourself, Jen.
I believe Councillor Berry was first, if you wanted to.
Okay, then go ahead, Lisa.
I just think it's often a conception that when people say the township is liable, well, the tax base is liable. So if we're receiving lawsuits because of injury on our property, everyone's paying for that. I think that's something that should be remembered.
Yeah, that's a good point. We're not an independently financed organization with no connection to the people. Jen, go ahead, please.
Whereas I entirely appreciate and agree with the liability concern and the code concerns, I wonder if it would be a good wake-up call if, when staff report back on the subject to council, that our building and bylaw colleagues include what up to code actually might mean in these circumstances. Certainly, having just gone through a building process myself, including stairways, I know that they require a lot, and we could be talking about considerable pieces of infrastructure. And I just think that before we hit go, that we should be mindful of what it is we're asking, even if inevitably we have to hit go. Code is a lot different from a lot of the staircases along those roads, for sure.
I think you're right, and that there's so many complications around this that it's not like, I don't believe we would be pressing go anytime soon, because there are all the MPAC implications. There are the waterfront body issues, and under the official plan, existing infrastructure, the idea of grandfathering. Like, there's just so many things to it. I think we'll see this a number of times before it ever gets to something that we can actually implement. And of course, for anybody who thinks that it's some sort of money grab, it's actually a ton of work for the township. So there's no money grab there. Did I see another hand floating around there? Deputy Mayor Danielson.
Just as a bit of a corollary to the issue of liability, and I think that's, I'm glad that Lisa said that, because that was part of what when I say liability, I mean liability for all of us, not just for the corporation, but for everybody through their taxes. And speaking of taxes and what right that gives people, that's part of our discussion to determine the levels of service that we provide. And I don't know that I accept well, I pay taxes, so I get to be able to do that. At the Committee of Adjustment is faced with all kinds of very, very difficult decisions. And I don't know how many times I hear people say, Well, my family has been here for 40 years, for generations, and I should be able to do that. But you know, that's great, and we love that you've been here that long. It doesn't give you any more right than anybody else. So you know, we kind of have to try and balance that out too. What does, you know, waterfront taxes allow people to do? That's, you know, the service levels that we need to talk about.
And I'd also like to add, and what does paying taxes mean in terms of taxpayers' relationship with us representing the corporation to ensure the longevity of the community through things like healthy lakes and shorelines. So it's all connected.
Yeah.
So I think what I'm hearing is that there's interest in seeing what it looks like and what the options are. I wouldn't expect council to see something come back, you know, in a couple of weeks. Madam CAO, what are your thoughts on that? Like, there's a lot of work on this.
There will be a ton of work and research to do. There will be, you know, we have to consult with our municipal solicitor for options around what type of agreement we would need. You know, just considering those things to bring back to council, it might be a couple of months. And then, you know, council will need to give further direction, and staff will develop a program because of the number of properties this will involve. It will be over a period of, I would say, years, implementing something like this.
Can you also check with, maybe Treasury could check with MPAC just to circle back? I know the conversations were held, I keep saying 6-ish years ago. That's where we learned about some properties being identified or classified as water adjacent. Is that still the circumstance within MPAC's operational structure? And I know I heard from people who said that they are water adjacent, but they are classified waterfront and are paying waterfront taxes, even though they don't own the waterfront. So, you know, there's a bit of a challenge there too. We don't want to punish people or, you know, seem punitive in any way. I'm not sure whose hand was first. I think it might have been Deputy Mayor Danielson's.
I was glad to hear Angie say that we've got to go through a very detailed review, a lot of research involved, check with the lawyers. Also, I was just going to say, check with our insurers as well. Absolutely. To see, you know, what kind of position that we're in from their perspective.
Councillor Berry, and then Councillor Dayu, I think, has her hand up.
I'm curious to know, when it comes to permitting, if it's a one type of permit, or if grandfathering would be involved. I did take note of what Councillor Dayu said about building to code, and I wonder if anything that had to be permitted, if that would now mean that set of stairs could no longer be stairs and it had to be ramps because it had to be accessible. And I wonder, would there be two different types of permit systems, and how would that work with accessibility and grandfathering? How do you merge those two types of things?
Yeah, and I think we need to be careful with the word permit. I think in our world it would be a license of occupation, and we council has seen that come across the table a number of times where people have requested such documentation to access a road allowance to get to the back end of their property for, you know, building or different reasons. And so we will issue a license, will allow them to occupy that space for X period of time. So I see the CAO nodding. I think that's what we were talking about previously, was licenses of occupation. And huge job for sure. Councillor Dayu.
Just going down the code rabbit hole for another moment, knowing full well this is going to be the thing that keeps me up at night for the next several nights. I also would wonder what would happen if we do insist that they go to code, which means, you know, possibly piers being drilled down into, you know, into the shoreline or whatever it might be. And then say 5 years later, we need to ask them to remove all of that because they're slumping and there has to be road work done. And they've just put in several $1,000s worth of infrastructure at our insistence in order to satisfy the need of that license. And it's a big old rabbit hole. And I do not envy our building and bylaw colleagues right now sitting and listening to this. But these are the kinds of things that I think we're going to have to think about really, really seriously.
Yeah, and I see this as simply exploratory conversations. It could be the case that you're all familiar with sort of my silly reference, you know, what's it going to take to get me a Ferris wheel and a golf course? And then the work is done and it's like $4 billion and a three-legged pony. And then you say, oh, and then you refine. So staff could come back and say, you know, our first go at this is we don't have enough humans, we don't have enough money, we don't have enough enforcement, we just don't have enough of the stuff to do the thing. And then we will have to you know, review, assess, refine, and continue to discuss until we can land at something that's workable for everybody. And again, it's not a matter of punishing people, it's a matter of aligning processes with where we are trying to take the community. So we could land nowhere, or we could land somewhere. So we'll have to just wait and see. Is that enough on that we've given to staff to think about? Angie, do you have anything else that you think staff need from us on that?
I don't think so. You know, I envision it bringing back a number of options for council to consider.
Okay. All right. Well, thanks everybody for that. So then, so those are the two that I think are, well, we've passed them back to staff, and then now I want to get into the big meaty part of our conversation, which is just our general philosophy, docks and landings. We have 27 of them, and we have, you know, different services levels in the north and the south based on amalgamation. We have challenges, as Councillor Dayu mentioned previously. We have challenges with parking. We have challenges with winter access. We have challenges with trailer storage, empty trailers being stored in our parking lots all summer and impeding access for trail users or day users. We have derelict boats and derelict docks and derelict all kinds of things. So this is a really high level conversation about where we might go or what our concerns might be for all of those issues. I suppose if I start on from my notes, the first area of interest is boat docking and mooring. And so docking, of course, is where water access folks keep their boats during the boating season when they're not at their property. So, you know, people rent space at, get a dock space at Oakview Lodge or Big Hawk Marina or places like that, Mountain Trout House. Mooring is when you leave your boat on a municipal pier or landing while you pop into town to do your groceries or visit your sister. We have, the township isn't a marina and we don't provide marina services. We have over many, many years inherited the existing system. And some of the changes that I spoke about at the start of this meeting, changes in the community and more people moving here and greater growth. I know Chris has seen it when he was at a particular landing having a conversation, and somebody said, well, I hope you're gonna increase it so we can all have docking space. Like, so there are challenges. And so if we start with docking and mooring, there are growing concerns about where people store their boats when they're not there. Right now, there are at least 6 boats with covers on them on the municipal pier at Coagama Lake, and those folks aren't in town doing the shopping. They're home. You know, there's another enforcement issue. Should they be tagged? They're not supposed to be there. We have a mooring bylaw. You can't park more than 12 hours with your boat. And so all of these issues, looking for thoughts from council on, quite honestly, what the heck to do with this situation, which is one of many. Councillor or Deputy Mayor Danielson.
Just to sort of start off with a bit of a broad statement, and it does not include necessarily parking of vehicles and trailers right now, but I do think 2 things. First of all, that this is a really important area for us to discuss, particularly for Algonquin Highlands, where we promote ourselves as everything adventure, everything trails and nature. I believe that our docks and landings are part of a, you know, basically a transportation system in a form, and have to be considered to some extent that way. And I also think that, you know, we're so tourism oriented that if we want to promote ourselves and see growth and adventure within our boundaries continue, that this is something that we really do have to consider. I'm not Personally, I'm not in favor of reducing levels of service. I think that that we need to continue at least at the pace or financial level that we're at. But there obviously needs to be some shift, because there's a huge difference in the level of infrastructure in different parts of the municipality, and some people are being overserved and some people are being underserved, and I think we need to try and find a balance, and obviously that's something that's going to happen over time. But I think that our most recent experience and the price tag attached to it for the number of people involved, not that they're any less important than other places, but there are much larger lakes with almost nothing but a nice sloped spot for people to put their boats in the water. So we need to find a balance for this.
Yeah, and remember too, there are a lot of places where people have traditionally been hauling their boats up on shore. That's Crown land. It's not even our land.
Mhm.
So that's another complicating factor. In terms of the boats on land, particularly where they are on Crown land, we don't provide docks. Like we don't build docks for people to keep their boats at Monday to Friday. Never have. It would probably bankrupt the township, or we would have to look at a very costly community improvement plan, which is not popular. What would maintenance or addressing that look like, or do we just leave people to their own devices? And what are the implications for shorelines and all of those kinds of things? And is it opening a huge can of worms that we should just put the lid back on, I guess? Councillor Dayu.
There we go. I am representing the ward of small lakes. There are about 14 lakes in Ward 3. All of them, apart from a tiny corner of Kawagama, are small, and a lot of them have a few water access properties here, a few there, sometimes up to half. But it's a small ecosystem and a small community. And I have seen that while there are differences within these different lake communities, there are a few consistent points when it comes to docks and landings. I've spoken to most of the lake association presidents of the lakes, or lake reps where there isn't a lake association, and they have consistently said that they don't want more infrastructure. They don't want bigger and bigger and bigger things for bigger and bigger and better boats. They fully appreciate that on a small lake, you want to make sure that the boats stay small, that the wakes remain small, that the loons have a place to hatch their eggs, that the traffic is maintained low, and they actually prefer that on their lakes everyone has. I'm so sorry. Everyone has a small tin boat that they use in order to get back and forth to their water access only cottage. And they have, amongst them, over the last 30 to 50 years, figured out a system of docking close to the municipal landing, which does work for them, and which does regulate the size of boat that can be put on the lake. So with a very, very few exceptions, we do see that they have the smallest tin boats possible, because they know they only have a tiny segment of that shoreline to use under their collective community code of honor when they're traversing back and forth. So I feel, in short, that we can be really driven by what the lake communities themselves have figured out. They do make do, and they do not mind the fact that they just have a little ramp going down into the water, because it means that folks passing by aren't going to come and swim and use it as a picnic spot and leave their garbage. They don't mind their smallness, because they've chosen their cottaging experience there because of that smallness. The key differences I see, though, is that there are some lake communities which are very well organized. It almost looks like there's an orderly plan where everyone has their own space. Everyone is expected to to keep their boats clean, et cetera, and orderly. And then there are other landing areas which are a bit of a debacle, to be honest. It looks like a bit of a war zone is passed through, and there are abandoned boats, and they've clearly been there for years, and there's no rhyme or reason to that space. So what to do with that, if we leave it to the communities to organize or not, I don't know. I put that to council. Certainly there's a desire to get the abandoned boats out of the way in those areas. But on the whole, it does seem like there is a system that is working, and the bylaws that we create or improve, in my opinion, for the small lakes, I would like to see driven largely by community practice.
And I think one of the challenges we have is bylaws are bylaws. I don't think we can have different bylaws for different lakes, but we have to have the bylaw people speak to that, and they're not here today. So unfortunately, they're not listening. I don't disagree with you at all. I mean, I'm certainly not looking at the township being the great provider of massive pieces of infrastructure all over the place. I think that the communities, as you've said, have managed themselves very well over a number of years. There are a number of significant pinch points for us, and there are other places that are just fine, thank you very much. So the derelict boats, that's something that you hear about quite a bit, is how to get them out of here. You know, the Halls Hawk Association undertook a very successful derelict dock and raft program. And so again, we have to be considerate of who might manage derelict boats that are left around, because when we worked with the Halls Hawk folks, they asked us to provide staff and trucks, and we declined that because we felt that it would just, our staff would be there by themselves doing it, and we would have to do it for everybody, and we just don't have public works staff and trucks sitting around, waiting for a job. I wonder if the same thing would happen with derelict boats. How do you know they're derelict? Maybe someone just hasn't used it for a year, and how would that be monitored and managed? Who pays for it? Where does it go? What do we do with it? Is there a way to identify them? There's a lot of questions attached to that. So what I'm looking for from council is, do we leave it to the lake associations to take care of that because it's their community, and they, as you say, Jen, a lot of them are really well organized and are really quite a tight community themselves. Do we need to, should we, is it a core service, or leave it well enough alone? Lisa Berry.
Do we know, just wondering, do we know if the marinas are at capacity? Is it a case of people don't want to pay to moor their boats and they're using the free option, or is it a case of, I just wonder, is that a part of the puzzle? It
is in some cases, I think, but there aren't marinas on every lake, and so there is a very mysterious entity called a water lot, and water lots go back a number of years to when the ministry, was it federal or provincial, Angie, that gifted us all the landings of the
it was the federal government,
right? So in the 80s,
it was in the 80s. Yeah.
So in the 80s, there was a number of Quagga was one of them, Big Hawk is another one, and sometimes you'll still see the big sort of gray sign legs. I think I'm not sure the sign actually has ever been changed to Big Hawk, but they were federal landings. They were maintained by the feds, and they provided the great gift of giving them to the municipalities to manage. And so over years, they've just been acquired by the township and sort of left as they are, with some improvements here and there. But water lots were attached to that. And so in places like Oakview and Little Hawk and Mountain Trout House, there are technically water lots, which is a space laid out on a map in the water within which those marinas are supposed to have their docks, and marinas can't just build docks forever and ever and ever. They're supposed to stay inside those water lots. Over time, I think track has been lost of water lots, and I've mentioned a number of times to Angie, where are we with those water lots? So there aren't They are at capacity. Lisa, to answer your question, yes, in some cases, they're not really supposed to put out new docks, and most of them know that. And some people, yeah, don't want to pay. I know in one marina, they are, sort of shrug their shoulders that there's still people who will drive their boats up on the shore rather than pay for a docking slip through the marina. So it's both. And to answer your question, it's both. So, water lots, yet another challenge. Okay, so I didn't really get an answer about derelict boats. Is that something that we could just maybe do a circular and information piece to lake associations to encourage the removal of those by their own folks? Liz?
I think that's a good starting point. It's information and a soft approach to start with. I obviously that we're not going to be able to do much with crown land properties or properties that don't belong to the municipality. But for sure, if there are derelict or what we over time determine are derelict boats, some form of note. First of all, information going out to people. Second, some kind of notification. Tag the boat for a period of time. I would hate to see us haul away somebody's 30-year-old treasured tinny that they just haven't been able to get to for 3 years, because there are those circumstances.
Yeah, it happens. And that's where I think, tread carefully. There are, personally, I've had an increasing number of complaints about, the shorelines and derelict boats and whatnot. But we do need to tread carefully because, while we don't want to become the big broom that has to clean the stuff all up because it's staff time. They're not our boats. And what if it is somebody who says, "Where'd my boat go?" I saw a hand. Whose hand did I see? Councillor Dayus, was your hand up?
No, it wasn't, but I'll take the opportunity to say there are some lakes, of course, that don't have functioning lake associations anymore. They haven't found that a required thing for them. So it does put the onus on an organization that doesn't necessarily exist. I think there's also the small piece that it is our land, and when the aesthetic is bad, that reflects badly on us. So, to a certain point, we can request that work from the community, but at a certain level, we're probably going to want to step in there and clean up our own property.
Yeah, there could be, and we'll leave that to staff to come up with. Maybe there's a one-time sweep, and then the expectation is it needs to be kept that way. I think the CAO has had her hand in the air, and then I see Lisa Berry and then Mr. Card.
Yes, thank you. And again, it would, certainly we can develop something, going out to tag the boats and whatnot. There has to be, I think, or what? So if they're not removed, is council then prepared to allow staff to have them removed? Because they would then be sort of impounded in our own property, and there would be a fee for them to come and get them.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think what you'd find, I'm just surmising, I think you'd find that there'd be some boats that would stay there, like in the impound, and then they would end up being surplused or in the landfill. But that could be part of it is, do we then, so build it backwards? Do we then have to, because Liz said this earlier, or somebody did, enforcement for a variety of reasons is becoming an increasing challenge right across cottage country. It's not just us. And so then do we build our enforcement policies with those caveats in them that says, if we have to take your boat and we keep it for 6 months and you make no contact, then we get rid of it. I don't know the legality of all that stuff, but there has to be an outcome. You're right. And I mean, that's the value of these big picture discussions, is it allows us to say, what if, and then get some professional advice on what we can and can't do for the community. Lisa Berry.
I just think, kind of going back to our earlier conversation about removing docks and that are on township or on municipal road allowance and that type of thing, and then moving forward to talking about docks and landings, I wonder if there's an opportunity to recognize that these are cultural assets in our township. And, you know, I wonder, just putting it out there, if we invested more in the landing and less in the dock, how that would look. So less docking, but you had, you know, you're still offering, how do you offer access for multi-use? So how do you offer access for people to swim and safely dock a boat, or come bring a boat to a trailer? And how do you do that? And then complicating the situation is the water access people. How do they get to town to get their groceries and not put their put their boat on a trailer?
Yeah, well, I sure hope that nobody is swimming off of a municipal landing and getting in the way of people trying to moor their boats so they can go and get their groceries. So there are also some usage considerations that we don't want conflicts as well. I think I saw Chris's hand up. Chris, were you going to weigh in here? This is your wheelhouse.
Yes, thank you. Just in relation to property boundaries relative to stashed boats or derelict boats and trailers, etc. As you mentioned, we have been gifted most of the landings, both from the feds and the province in some cases, and in other cases they were on our road allowances. But what we don't have a clear understanding of is the extent of which the property is the township. So it would be a combination potentially of road allowances, crown land, gifted land, and then potential township property. So in the case of some of the instances that Councillor Dayu, for example, is talking about, and there's many of them, I'm just using these ones because they're handy. The boats that are derelict and stored on shore, we would first have to ascertain whether or not where they are is actually even township owned property. So a big missing piece to the puzzle for all of our landings is what the extent of those properties are. And up front, we'd have to do, you know, just some GIS type research at the staff and planning level to see what kind of information exists and is already on file. Then start to fill in the gaps if they exist, which may include things like property surveys, etc. And we may find out that we own a significant portion of the properties, or in some instances, we may find out that we don't own those portions of property at all. It may be bleeding into adjacent private property or be entirely on Crown land. But before we can start putting tickets on boats as reminders or asking people to remove them, we'd need to ascertain those limits.
Yes, and that's where it's unfortunate that our that building and bylaw isn't hearing all of this, but I'm sure it'll be conveyed to them. I have a little list here, and I have Lisa, and then Jen, and then Liz, I think, if that's correct.
Not yet.
Oh no, I see your head's down. I think you're going to come at us with a big long list. Lisa, go ahead, please.
It just seems like this is just, you know, expanding into such a mass of issues and concerns. And I wonder, is it time that we maybe just reconsider tendering out maybe a new docks and landing plan?
Well, we have a docks and landings plan and the asset management plan that we just got our hands on the other day. So, and that's what I was saying is, because there are myriad issues connected to it, the asset management plan is going to tell us what needs to be done where and in what priority based on the assessment of condition. How we do that is up to us and as a group to discuss what it is we think service levels should be, what are core services. You know, is it important for the township to step in and clean up derelict boats because we've had some complaints, or is it in terms of shoreline health something that we actually want to tackle? And we can't do everything and we can't be everything, and we can't have our finger in every single pie. So again, the purpose of this conversation was to have this, like, talk about all these issues. I'm not looking for any decisions today, but it's all really good food for thought, and staff will go back and mull it over and think about it, and it'll come back many more times before anything ever happens. But I mean, all things considered, right? I mean, if there could be, I think that's something to hold on to, Lisa, for the asset management plan discussion in the bigger picture, because, you know, there's millions and millions of dollars worth of capital asset improvement that needs to be done in that plan, and how are we going to manage that? Councillor Dayu.
Wanted to concur with and underscore the point that Mr. Carr just made about property boundaries. I know of one definitive instance in Ward 3 where there is an encroachment, a creeping encroachment on someone's private property. They know where their private property ends, more or less, between them and the municipal land where people are docking their boats, and people have just, you know, by hook and by crook, just slowly migrated over that line. And that's concerning for that property owner, to the point where they, you know, when I saw them in the shopping center in Dorset the other day, you know, they did point that out to me, that they were concerned about their liability. And it also sort of begs the question of, when new people buy properties up here, and I realize that we do have some arrangements in place that people have to come up with their own solutions, but if they think that the space that they are inheriting from the previous owner is in fact their space to inherit by community code, but actually it's on someone's private property, then I don't know if that could ever fall back on us. So I really do concur with Chris's desire to see those property lines established and known and probably publicized too, so we all know where we're at.
Yeah, and I was interested to find out in doing a little recon when we had our Hardwood Lake landing discussion, that not only is the landing that we maintain appears to be Crown land, so is that waterfront, and then it goes between private properties to a huge piece of Crown land. And so the docking challenges, or the boat storage challenges at Hardwood Landing in particular, Crown land. So that's where for us it's not our land, it's hands off. So, and there's quite an extensive line of land there that's Crown. So that's what we need to find out is if we want to pursue this, and how much work is it, and you know, what's the ROI on it. So council then has to, it's again with my how much effort is it for, you know, a Ferris wheel and a golf course. Well, we're not prepared for that. So staff will have to give all of this some consideration and say, if you want to pursue that, council, you're going to need this, and this much money. And council may say, you know, in the face of other competing priorities, that's not top of the list. But it's all planning for the future of the community. Councillor or Deputy Mayor Danielson.
Forgive me, my wheels have been kind of turning away in here, and I may have missed this, but with respect to particular Hardwood Landing and where the Crown land begins or ends, is our actual landing on Crown land?
It appears to be on the GIS.
Because that's not something that we can just say, you know, that's Crown land, it's not our issue. I think that is something that we do need to try and resolve.
Well, maybe not. It's probably
we can give it back to them.
Yeah, that's right. I doubt it. It was probably one of the landings that was gifted to us with a red ribbon on it. Here's a landing.
Gifted to us without ownership. Here, we'll let you borrow this spot.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. Okay, so I'm hearing there's some consideration for staff to give in how what this might look like, how it could move forward, what it entails, what are the implications, are we going to go there? Lots of questions, lots of good questions. And so, Angie, do you have sufficient to have a chin wag with staff in the background to?
I think so. I mean, Chris and I have talked about this previously, about lot lines and whatnot. We also discussed I think initially there is some research to be had in our own records as far as the old Sherburne files and that sort of thing. So I think that would be a consideration as well. But
Mayor Moffat, did you wish to look at the current bylaw for docking and mooring right now in detail, or is that coming up next or at another point in the conversation?
Well, it kind of falls under mooring, doesn't it? I mean, it was put in place to fix some misuse, overuse, and a little bit of abuse at one particular location, and it has unfortunately not been equitably applied. It's a bit hit and miss. Again, we're back to how many bylaw enforcement officers we have. We don't have people who are just driving around looking for infractions. People are increasingly less inclined to file complaints. And so situations that are in contravention just simply get left alone because we don't know about them and we don't have enough people to do anything about them. So the bylaw does exist, and I think it needs to be more equitably applied across the township. And in order to keep mooring spots open for their intended purpose, which is coming and going, not leaving from Monday to Friday and getting your boat off the municipal dock or landing on Friday to load up and go to the cottage. That's not what they're for. So what were you thinking about in terms of that?
A couple of points. I'm just looking at it now. In section 3, docking and mooring of boats, if I understand these points correctly, 3B, no person shall dock or moor a boat in any municipality owned or operated docking area for more than the allowable duration, 12 hours. Does that mean that the people who are, gone for 2 weeks have to take according to this bylaw right now, should be taking their boat out of that space and lugging it back to the city with them and then bringing it back? Is that what the bylaw suggests currently? And the same question goes for 3E, no person shall operate a boat from or leave a boat on any beach in any municipally owned or operated docking area. Does that mean, using Hardwood Landing as an example, because we've all been there recently, that whole beach line, does that mean no one is actually technically allowed to dock there right now? Because if that's correct, then I don't think that's tenable.
So the idea is that you can't leave and again, we have landings, which are meant for loading and unloading and getting your groceries and your wood stove and that kind of thing. And then you can't stay there for more than 12 hours. So if you have to, nip to Toronto or Guelph or wherever you live for a medical appointment or whatever the purpose may be, it doesn't really matter. But you can't leave your boat tied to the municipal infrastructure for more than 12 hours, full stop. What you do with your boat is your issue to solve. So if that means, if you don't have a place to, maybe it means you need to haul it up on the beach. At Hardwood, the beach is crown land, so it's not. So that particular section, the second section, wouldn't apply because it's not our land. So these are exactly the kind of complications that need to be fleshed out and discussed, because we could end up saying, it doesn't work, or there's different implications for different areas. So to answer your question in the short term, yes, that's what that means. What someone does with their boat for more than 12 hours that's up to them to figure out what they're going to do with that. I saw hands, and sorry, but my screen, people are jumping all over, so I'm losing hands because none of you are in the same place anymore. Deputy Mayor Danielson.
I see how it relates to the discussion that we're having, but I just want to point out that the actual bylaw itself and our discussing points about the bylaw was not on the agenda. It was my understanding that we were trying to look at this as more of a blue sky discussion. Not to say that we can't look at the bylaw and say, how does this work into what we're talking about right now? But I don't think we're anywhere near ready to actually look at or amend the existing bylaw right now.
No, that certainly wouldn't be my intent. Knowing that there's challenges or potential challenges in how it's written, and those challenges either in enforcement or allowance, I think is part of the conversation for staff to hear. And because the bylaw, we need a bylaw to manage the use of those landings. What it looks like could change depending on all these other factors that we're discussing today. So yeah, we're not going to go through it line by line, but so that is the bylaw and how it's written, Jen. Okay, so I'm going to leave that there, and then I want to touch briefly on again another one, trailer storage. So folks store their boat at a marina in the winter, covered in blue tarp, and then it gets delivered, and they take it to where they're going. But it's on a trailer, and we end up with trailers, and we get a lot of complaints about this. People can't park their cars in some limited parking areas because it's full of empty trailers. And so the question is, should the township do something about this, or should the township be saying, once you've launched your boat, your trailer, you can't take up parking space, very, very limited and valuable parking spaces for cars with trailers, and you have to put them somewhere else, back at the marina or your front lawn at home, or I don't know. So are there options around that? Is this a problem? Are there enforcement and human resource challenges in doing anything about this? We had some problems at the Hawks a number of years ago, and trailers have been tagged and moved, but those challenges remain. So trailer storage, so empty trailer storage during the boating season. What are thoughts from council on that? Deputy Mayor Danielson.
Is it a problem? Yes. Should people be leaving their trailers in limited and valuable parking places? No. I think there are opportunities for people to find places for their trailers. Obviously, it's going to lead into the discussion about whether we should be providing space and more parking in some areas. Looking at the Hawks, to me, that's reached a point of we used to think that it was concerning, the number of vehicles that, they're parked for kilometers along that road, but now to discover that they're parked on both sides of the road, I'm wondering how anybody gets through there. It's really become a very, I think, a serious problem. I know that lots of the marinas have trailers just stored there without the boats, and I think that there's opportunity there in one way or another for people to take advantage of. It's pretty easy to just unload your boat and pull your trailer up to the closest spot to the lake and leave it there, and that's obviously not working.
Yeah, and especially with limited parking, it does take up space, and I think, Adam, there's concerns you've expressed, and we'll get to, because the next item to have a go at is parking, and we have Adam's report that we're not making a decision on today. That increased use and people have more and more vehicles coming to people's properties are creating a potential emergency services issue, because you can't, when cars and trailers are parked down both sides of a road, then it's a problem for public works vehicles and fire trucks and ambulances. I see Lisa first, and then back to Liz.
By no means am I saying I'm not concerned about the trailers, but I do feel differently about the trailers than I do the the boats that are being left on the shoreline. I think there's a bigger environmental impact as far as naturalized shoreline, having boats left there for weeks, months, years at a time. Where with the trailer, I see it just as a bit of a difficult thing, because you want people to come up to their cottages or dwellings and they drop their boat in the water and they go to their place, and yes, they need a place to park it while they're at their cottage. I don't think there's a lot of people that are leaving their trailers there and going home. So I do feel differently about the boats that are being left on the shoreline versus the trailers, but I do see that as boats get bigger, so do trailers, and then the space to store them becomes an issue. So I feel they're two different things, but they are sort of connected.
Yeah, Deputy Mayor Danielson.
I agree that the issue of the preservation and protection of the lake and the shoreline is key. When looking at both situations, I do believe that there are people who will literally go back to the city and leave their trailer on land that doesn't belong to them. I think that happens, and I think that we've also got circumstances where we get back to well, I'm a taxpayer on a water access only property or owner, and this should be my right, versus the people who come and visit or are just in the area, like day trippers or weekend users, who will do the same thing. And we're going to have to figure out how to sort out who has rights to what, and that's going to get really back to that sticky word.
I'm not so sure they're rights as much as they are privileges. There's no right to a parking space. It's how we work together to accommodate you know, the best use of land for people's purposes. Adam, do you want to talk to trailers at all? Does that fall into your world a little bit?
Yeah, if I may. Really, it's very similar to cars being parked on the road surface. There have been numerous times where we've gone up there and just trailers not hooked to vehicles but are locked, whether the wheels are locked or the tongue, the ball coupler itself has been locked, so no one can steal it potentially. It's pretty common to see that just as much as vehicles in that area.
Councillor Dayu.
Two thoughts. The first being, as a follow-up to Liz's last point, I do think we have to consider the day trippers in this, and maybe think of some kind of bylaw or some kind of something that means that we're ready for when all hell breaks loose, because a family of 17 people have all come up with their own boats for the day and have basically blocked all access for water access only people, because there's nothing prohibiting them from using that space and leaving their trailer that they've just brought up for the day, etc. So I do think it's not the most central part of this conversation, but I think it's an important one, and it might come and bite us someday if we don't think about it proactively and stick it in a bylaw somewhere, if we can come up with a game plan for that. So that was point number one. And point number two, just as we're talking about trailers and trailers along roads and using up spaces, I don't think we should forget winter trailer use as well. Adam and I have had some good conversations in the last couple of weeks with regards to some requests made by folks up at Bear Lake for trailer storage and parking for winter access on snowmobiles. And I wonder the degree to which that also fits into this conversation.
It does, and parking is next on the list.
Oh, so you would see that as okay, sure.
Yeah. So it's
there are trailers, a lot of trailers there too. That's all. Right? So.
That's right. Councillor Shortreed.
I think we just have to remember that our bylaw says that you can't moor for more than 12 hours. People have to have their trailers there so they don't leave their boats moored there. I mean, it's a catch-22.
Yeah, and then so when we move into the parking, we're also going to look at Adam's report. And it's so the parking is the biggest issue. So we can move there now because we have been at this now for an hour and a half. Great conversation. I'm not sure we've landed anywhere definitive, but that was never the intention. The intention was to throw it all on the table for us to be able to sort through and figure out what needs to pop to the top of the list. So we know that so parking, there are increasing challenges. Some locations are worse than others. So as we know, it's the Hawks all year and it's Bear Lake in the winter. There are, as I mentioned earlier, legitimate concerns with keeping roadways clear for emergency services. Increased use right now due to COVID has demonstrated that the challenges may not be going away anytime soon. And so I'm looking for the, what are the, I think this will be the most contentious discussion, but are there any obligations for the municipality to provide parking lots or not? And if not, whose responsibility is it, and under what circumstances? If the answer was yes, would that be year-round? Who would maintain them? Does it modify plow routes? Does that mean we have to hire more people? If we're going to create parking lots, would council consider any sort of partnership or a community improvement program wherein the beneficiaries through their taxes pay to have those lots built? In Adam's report, he's suggesting the potential for a pay-per-use parking lot, which would accommodate day users, trail users, as well as property owners. Is the provision of parking a core service? If we're not a marina, are we also then not a parking agent? What are the future implications for maintenance and replacement and enforcement? Like, this is a really, really big issue, and also a potentially extremely expensive issue. So I guess maybe we'll just have a few high-level thoughts and then have a look at what Adam's suggested specifically for the Hawks, which is not our first look at that. Thoughts on parking? Lisa Berry.
just because Councillor Dayu did bring up the bylaw and that, I think when you factor in some of the restrictions that the bylaw is having on especially 12 hours, you know, if we want people to come to their place, but they can't, that virtually makes they can't park their trailer for the weekend if they're only allowed to have a trailer there for 12 hours. I don't know. I do think that there's room for consideration, but it does open a can of worms. It almost further extends the whole docks, landings, now parking is now what we're trying to make more equitable across the township. It's now seeming to balloon.
Absolutely, and that was part of the purpose of having this discussion is it's a discussion that has been sort of bubbling at the edges of the radar for years and years and years. It's time to throw it on the table and examine it and decide how we're going to, if anything, do anything for addressing some of these issues going forward, and at what cost, for whose benefit, and under what circumstances. And I think, Lisa, the 12-hour parking is for boats, not for trailers, but I could be wrong about that. Liz Danielson.
That's exactly what I was going to say. I think that the 12 hours is limited to the mooring your boat at one of our piers or docks and leaving it there. I don't think there's any regulation about length of time that a trailer or a vehicle can be in place.
Okay, I don't have it in front of me. I've got
And neither do I.
I have two screens open and I can't open a third without anything else.
I think Chris is going to weigh in and clear this up for us. Mr. Card, go ahead.
Yeah, so it does only apply to the boats moored at docks or on beaches. And also I'd like to make the distinction that it's not necessarily an issue around people launching their boats and having their trailer there while they're there for the weekend and then leaving. The issue is that people are actually using the locations to store their trailers as a permanent long-term solution.
And we've been at that for years. Like we've made some changes there for all the right reasons, and you know, it sort of slides back, and then we address it and it slides back again. If we, as an example of the issue of parking, because we know we have challenges all over the place, if Adam can take us through the report on the proposed or opportunity for parking at two particularly bad locations, which is Big Hawk and Little Hawk. We did see this report a little while last year, I think. I'm not sure, and there's reasons why it's double the price now than it was the first time we looked at it. So Adam, if you want to take us through, and I think the process and the costs and the possibilities around this particular issue, I think sets the table for council for our takeaway, our homework is to consider how we would, should, or shouldn't apply a similar way of thinking in other areas. Deputy Mayor Danielson has something to say first.
I'm just a little bit concerned that we're going at this maybe from the wrong direction.
Okay.
I know that we need to look at Adam's report, and it's on the agenda, and it's a good report and something that we need to resolve. But I just kind of wonder if we shouldn't philosophically come to some agreement about parking and whether we're going to provide parking in certain areas or not, before we actually make a decision about we're going to build a parking lot. Don't get me wrong, I think we really need to do something for the Hulls Hawks area, but I also believe that we need to land somewhere on the issue of whether we should be providing parking, and if so, where, before we look at that or come to any conclusions about Hulls Hawks.
Yeah, I mean, it can be either way. There is absolutely, I don't have any intention of asking council if they want to proceed with the Hawk Lake proposal. I was suggesting that to go through that will help, and maybe not, it's up to council which way they want to go, would help set the table for, okay, if you want to provide parking, this is how big a deal it is, and this is what it could cost, and this is what it might mean for people. And are you prepared then to apply that same level of thinking in other places? Can we afford it? Can we enforce it? Is it even achievable for a municipality this size? So we can go either way you want, but that's what I was thinking, that going through the Adams report was simply to set the table. Councillor Dayu?
I lean a bit toward the direction that Liz was suggesting, trying to get a sense on our overarching philosophy towards parking. I had a couple of, and I have a couple of thoughts on that philosophy, if that's okay, if you don't want to go back into Adam's report.
Yeah, is council okay doing it that way? It doesn't matter to me. I'm just driving the bus. I'm not
Sure.
choosing the route.
Okay.
Okay, so go ahead, Jen.
So my first thought would be that if we are offering municipal landing services for boats, that there probably should be an equivalent parking setup. So if you're going to offer a service, it would be natural to have parking available for that service. For safety, particularly, I think about the Bear Lake landing, which is awkward and small, and the dock is actually right around the bay from where you put your boat in, and there's really no parking to speak of. There is a bit of parking along the road, but boy, if there were an accident there, I don't know what would happen. It's just not a great setup, but we are offering that landing service. So I do think we need to think about parking in conjunction with the level of service that we're offering and for the size of community. And what struck me is, actually even in thinking about Adam's report and how much that filters across or would replicate across to the other lakes. I almost wonder if we should be thinking about a contextualizing report. And I'm so sorry to suggest more work for our wonderful staff who are already doing so much, but I think I would be helped in this conversation if I knew pretty much on a lake per lake basis, on each lake, how many properties are there? How many of those properties are water access only? And then what are the development trajectory estimates for those lakes? So for example, Oxtongue Lake, I know we're at capacity, it's basically closed. There are a couple of vacant lots that you could get a single structure dwelling on, but really nothing more than that. Other lakes in my ward, I don't know, maybe the lake could still expand by 75%. And we still only have that limited landing space and that limited parking space. And that's going to be a problem. So I almost wonder, whether we would be served by knowing what is the current capacity of the lakes, what are the current expectations for development, so that when we think about parking, we can factor in the long-term horizon with that. Included in that, what are the current practices on that lake? I'm so sorry. I'm very sorry about my voicemail there. And what are the primary safety issues at each particular lake? So that maybe we're not talking about a replication of services from one lake to another. Maybe there are some lakes that only require a very limited amount of services, and other lakes like Hallshawks that require a lot more. So that contextualization at the right stage in our conversation would, I think, be very helpful to make informed decisions about how much service we can offer on any of these points.
And thank you for saying it in that way. And that's exactly the purpose of this conversation is, what are we doing, for whom and why? And you're right. And I do have written down here somewhere, like number of users. And I think that is important because just because there's a potential for 100 users, if there's only 10 users, but there's potential for 100 with day users, we're not building a parking lot for Christmas shopping. We don't have the money, we don't have the land, we don't have the resources, we can't enforce it, we just can't. So what can we do? Is it possible that, Lisa has mentioned this in a number of meetings, is can we, as long as safety and appropriate access is maintained, can we do things differently? Example is at Otter Lake, there's a big flat, looks like a picnic area and a boat launch, but there aren't boat access cottagers, so the boat launch should be enough. So if we have to replace that retaining wall, maybe we don't need a retaining wall because it's not for boat access. So I think we're not having, like I said at the beginning, that the asset management plan is going to tell us what needs replacing and in what sequence based on its condition assessment. We're the ones who have to have this contextualized conversation of, but what really needs to be there? What serves people and also serves the rest of the taxpayers in terms of bottom line. So I think that's a very valuable point. I see Lisa and Liz. I'm going to go to Liz first.
I I really like what Jen has had to say about taking a broader. I really do think that we need to take a look at the capacity of the lakes, what we're going to be faced with going forward, if we're going to be planning for certain parking areas. If we decide to go in that direction, we really do need to know what the long-term need might be. One of my questions was going to be, do we have we documented somewhere the areas where we do know that parking is an issue? That there is a large number of vehicles and or trailers that are accumulating and creating problems. And, you know, I think we need to look at that, you know, in our thinking. But, you know, it's an excellent point to look at. And I really feel badly about saying it because I know it's a lot of work to figure out, okay, what are our lakes? Where, I mean, we know where we've got access points. Which ones are truly the problem ones when it comes to parking? Because I don't think, I'm pretty sure, although I've only had a very cursory look at the asset management plan, it doesn't address that. It addresses our infrastructure and what needs to be done with it. And so at that point, I kind of wish that docks and landings had been broken out into a separate section. But that it is what it is. So, I mean, we're not there to talk about, we're not here to talk about that.
Yeah, and I went in the notes that I had sent out to council. That's what I was looking for in the discussion about creating a decision-making framework. And so it's just been captured here is that, you know, we can't be everything to everybody, and everybody doesn't get a pony. And so how do we develop a decision-making framework, which in Jen's language is how do we contextualize the conversation so that we can make individual decisions, but inside a predetermined framework that asks all these questions with the right information ahead of time. So we can either look at the asset management plan as words on a page and say, well, it says that this landing gets X amount of dollars next year, and we'll just do that. Or we can agree through this further conversation that we would be looking for a way to assess the recommendations of the asset management plan and tweak things. In my opinion, tweak things down a little bit that is more affordable yet still achievable and suitable for the long run. So that was the last point on my notes for us to get there, and Jen took us there a little more quickly. So thank you for that. Liz, go ahead.
You know what, this kind of goes back to a comment that Lisa made about we need to do a little more a study. There is a lot of work associated with this, and there are so many aspects of our operation that will not be touched on in the asset management plan. I mean, that's not what our expectations of that were. But when you look at the issues of, okay, the lakes, the capacity of the lakes, what's existing, you know, how we're going to, what framework we're going to use to reach some conclusions. Docks and landings are a big part of what makes us who we are. And maybe we really do need a separate docks and landings plan, which I would see as something that we need to talk about again during budget deliberations. And but I think it needs to be broken out and looked at in a much broader way than what we're seeing in the asset management plan.
Yeah, we can, can you make yourself a note to let's revisit that question when we are presented, the consultant is going to present the asset management plan, and then we'll have plenty to talk about. And I think that's the time to bring that back. I see Lisa Berry's hand waving around there. Lisa, go ahead.
I just keep thinking of at the end of the year when we get, you know, our final budget summary report, and you see the big circle of the pie, and, you know, a portion of it is waste and landfills, and a portion of it is transportation. And I'm wondering, you know, what portion of the pie is this becoming? And then I also think it really is becoming part of transportation, because people are trying to physically get to their property, and you know, we want to support that. We want to support that. There's economic impact, there's cultural impact, and I like the idea that Councillor Dayu says about assessing, you know, what is, you know, is this lake at capacity for infrastructure, or is this just a lake that's now gearing up to develop? And I think if we can look at that sustainably and long term and maybe not take it as a burden, but as a moving landscape.
Yeah, and I think there's a difference. I mean, I'll open the can of worms. I think there's a big difference between the issue that's Bear Lake Road, seasonal road. If people are buying a property on a seasonal road and it has no winter access, I don't believe it's our job to provide them winter parking, especially when it's surrounded by Crown land. This has been discussed over and over. Certainly Adam's had multiple conversations with different people. We did a number of years ago. The Bear Lake Road has a long and storied history. It was a forced road and there was court cases and whatnot, and the bridge was not built by the township, et cetera, et cetera. It is what it is now. So a number of years ago, through multiple discussions and meetings, we spent money on getting an engineer study for Bear Lake Road to bring it up to municipal standards. And the amount came back as $4 million. So council said it wasn't going to spend that money. So it offered the Bear Lake Road folks a community improvement plan wherein, as the beneficiaries of a year-round municipally maintained road, they would each personally contribute to the development of that, and it was flatly rejected. And so that happened, and I appreciate now that there are different property owners down that road, because there's buildings going up all the time and people's lives are changing. I think that's a sort of a special conversation in terms of whether or not it's the township's responsibility to provide parking for people who are using a seasonal road in the non-season. We have other seasonal roads in the township, and are we going to do the same thing for all of them as well? So again, it's just one more piece of that very complex pie that we don't have to solve today, but it's just continued food for thought as we assess our priorities and the needs of the community going forward. Deputy Mayor Danielson.
Well, just to add to the complexity of the Bear Lake Road area, I mean, we're also talking about, are we required to serve residents from neighboring municipalities? Because if I'm not mistaken, there are property owners down Bear Lake Road that are in Dysart.
Yes.
So that just adds complexity to the matter, that's all.
Well, there's no end of complexities for this entire conversation. There's we're ending up with more complexities than solutions. Councillor Bayou.
Yeah, and adding to that list, there's of course all of the snowmobilers who come through that aren't at the end of the road in Dysart, but are using that space as part of their snowmobile club activities. And do we need to serve those needs? Arguably not. I think it could go either way. We also have a tourism objective in front of us. But the flip side, I think, of your argument, Carol, could be that if we are not in a position to offer Bear Lake Road folk a 4-season road, then this might be the thing that we can offer them. Sorry folks, we can't put this $4 million, which equates to half of our operating budget on a yearly basis, into your particular road. Wish we could, we can't. You say you're not able to chip in that money either. We totally understand why. That's a lot of money. So how is this as a compromise that we do create a spot where you could park, you could pull out your snowmobile, and you can access your space if you want to get to your cottage in the wintertime? It's following and honoring the needs of the people who are paying their taxes that we are stewarding on their behalf and in their benefit. So I think the argument could be made in either direction.
Well, it absolutely can, and then part of that is looking at what it takes to get there. And Adam, in his assessment of this over the years, the land in the area is Crown. So if the Bear Lake folks wanted to contact the ministry and sort of work on that themselves, that would be great. If there ever did prove out to be parking that needed to be plowed, it modifies the plow routes and would require another employee. And so that's one of those if this then that, and that's a judgment call that only council can make with the information that it's provided and in the face of all the other things we have to do in the township. The answer could be sure, the answer could be no. So we don't know that yet. We're nowhere near that. And that's the purpose of this conversation is, where are we going, for who, for what reason, and on what priority level? How do you pick and choose who goes first? Liz, you had your hand up?
No, I think the conversation has kind of covered it. I think we're sort of veering into road discussions as opposed to docks and landings, but they kind of go together.
Like parking, I mean, parking's a big
You're gonna have
deal.
a landing, how are you going to get there? And yeah, no, it's nothing further to say right now.
Yeah, okay, then, do you want to have a quick look at Adam's report just to get an idea? It is modified from prior. Like I say, we're not making a decision on pulling the trigger on this today, but it is, I think, an important conversation in terms of if there's going to be something developed, how good does it have to be, for whom, for what reasons, at what cost, at whose behest, and all of those murky questions. Lisa Berry.
I do have a hard time looking at this without looking at everything as a bigger part of the, I see this as a piece of the puzzle that we're putting in place without all the other pieces. That's kind of where I see this report. I
see it as providing council a fulsome understanding of how much work and money goes into parking. Parking isn't just knocking down some trees and putting some gravel in place. And Adam can explain that the reason the price has increased on this is because this conversation was coming and there are pressures for parking all over the township, that probably the best way to approach this is a partnership. And I can tell you that I've had conversations with the Halls Hawk, a couple of Halls Hawk executive members, and we're talking about the Hawks, not the Halls at this point. And that in consideration of this particular report or any discussions, the association is willing to explore all possibilities, including a community improvement plan, but without any commitments because of today's conversation. So by all means, we don't have to talk about this today, but the idea is parking lots are not a matter of pushing some dirt around and putting some gravel down. It's a bigger deal than that if we want to do it correctly and well and provide the baseline for equitable application across the township. Councillor Dayu.
While I agree with what you're saying, I also want to acknowledge that Halls Hawks is a huge outlier when it comes to the scope of need across the township. Certainly in Ward 3, we have absolutely nothing near that need. When I talk about parking in Ward 3, I'm thinking about, hey, I wonder if we can, and I know it's not quite this simple, but if we can just expand a little bit more space here and grade it, that would be that would allow the 14 water access cottagers to sneak one more vehicle in there or whatever it might be. The Halls Hawk, if we look at it by itself, is enormous and scary and is not a fair indication of what we would have to replicate across the rest of the township. It is an outlier on that side. So I'm very happy to go through the nuts and bolts of the report today. I do agree with Lisa. I think we need to contextualize it with the other needs in the township too, because it's not, I don't think this is something that we would be replicating. Certainly not.
Yeah, I agree with you. And I think I would ask Adam to step in that it would be nice if we could just push out a little bit of space and throw some gravel down for those 14 folks. But the point is, I don't know that it's that easy, even if it's that small. Adam, did you want to speak to that? Because I don't know the answer.
Yes, thank you. In speaking to the Bear Lake Road and the surrounding area, is that the township does not own any property in that area. And in the past year, there was some logging operation that took place just off of Bear Lake Road. And the issue that we would face there is, again, it's not township owned property. The rights to the logging in that area, I don't have enough experience, or I haven't looked into it any much further, but any of my experience to do with logging, I should say, it doesn't offer you that ability to create parking and then the logging crews try to come in and work around vehicles. The landing in the area is strictly built for all-terrain vehicles that can drop logs off and trucks come in and pick them up. So again, we don't own that land, and it's a very difficult spot for us to try to develop. It's not just a matter of kicking some dirt around and cutting trees and grading and extending, because we don't own that land. If council may remember, in late 2018, early 19, we talked about purchasing land from the MNRF in Little Hawk, and that was a very expensive endeavor and would be up to 2 years before we'd be able to break ground in there. And I could see that being very similar in this situation. Up on Livingston Lake Road, there are a couple other options for parking regarding in some pits that are currently off of Livingston Lake Road. And any of my research into that as well is those are earmarked as MNR property for pit use. So other regulations would come into factors where who would maintain that, and an agreement, you'd have to speak with the MNRF. Again, that's a long, lengthy process that if we start maintaining more than what we currently do, as Mayor Moffat has brought forward, it increases staff. It's another cost to the ratepayer, and it's just not something that I can see us doing in the near future. If I can speak to the Halls and Little and Big Hawk Lake, to speak to that, there are 109 properties on Big Hawk, and there are 100 on Little Hawk. And over the course of the Labor Day long weekend in 2018, we documented estimated over just 350 cars that were parked in that location. So when you're talking about 14 potentially vehicles as opposed to 350, you can see the level of not so much the level of service, but the level of impact we have on liability and the potential, for something to happen there is much higher. So when we look at building parking lots in the Halls, in the Hawk Lake locations, I think it's really important that we consider that pay-per-use system. Because of those properties that are on the Little and Big Hawk Lake, I wouldn't necessarily agree that it is fair for all of those, let's call it 209 properties, should have to pay for parking in that area when there's potentially another 100 users for backcountry camping, for camping, local campgrounds, local camps come and use that area, cottage rentals, things of that nature. And as COVID has shown us in the last 6-8 months, the increased traffic up here is just gone through the roof for us. So a pay-per-use system, and the reason the cost is so much higher this year is the design plan is to pave the parking lot, to put in lights, to put in a full legitimate parking spot and have it maintained, whether that is increased township staff and equipment or hired staff and equipment. We haven't gone that far into it just yet, but a pay-per-use system is basically whoever uses it pays for it. And somebody in Oxtongue who would never use that property, they don't feel that pressure on their taxes, let's say, whereas somebody from out of town would be paying to park there. Very similar to, like I said in the report, like a hospital or a park and fly.
Well, everybody hates parking at hospitals, so I wouldn't use that as an example.
No.
So I have to say I'm not hearing an overarching thrill to go through the report. No offense, Adam. I think there is value in what's been said in that there. We've read the report. There are some factors, and I think we should say out loud too that it's the engineering. I think I already said this, but I'm going to say it again. Adam, it's the engineering were the factors coming into play in this project that raised the price so dramatically.
That is correct. When we were discussing parking last year, it was one of those basic cut a couple trees down and throw some gravel around and grade it out, and then we would maintain it as we normally do through our levels of service, which is basically we plow and sand it when we get to it. It's not part of our core service in that area to plow the parking lots that are up there. There's a bus turnaround, which we make a quick pass in, and then we carry on about our business. So they do get plowed on a regular basis. However, it wouldn't be daily. And if you're paying for parking and you're building a parking lot of this nature and it's a pay per use for everyone that uses it, I think it's only our responsibility to make sure that it's maintained year round to a level that it could be used. Very similar to, again, the hospital parking.
Yeah, I would have, I'm just sort of mentally picturing that, in the middle of the pristine, dark wilderness, there's a lit up parking lot. To me is quite offensive. So I don't think we'd have, if we ever got there, I think we would have to make sure we had very environmentally conscious lighting that was guidance light only, if at all. But I mean, that's not for today. So does council, have there been enough questions asked? Do we have enough? I mean, in terms of our framework, I think we've talked around that we're looking for a greater look at users, usage. What does parking mean? Is it pushing some gravel around, or is it paving and pay per use with lights? Does it affect plow rates and plow routes and staffing? Would we have to buy land? At what cost? During what timeline? Especially up in the places like Bear Lake, where it's all crown and there's logging roads and M&R pits, are there spring or fall risks of conflict due to competing uses and limits on? There's a million questions to ask. Would council be, it's 11:10, so we've been at it 2 hours. Would that be enough to get juices flowing to answer some questions to continue this conversation a little later on? Or do you want to keep going around or offer more suggestions? I don't mean go around, but offer more suggestions. Liz and then Jen, please.
I think that we need to continue these discussions. I don't, not at this particular moment necessarily, but I'd like to break it into chunks so that, we look at each aspect individually, make it clear of the information that we think we need or are looking for in order to help us make a decision. Obviously some of these things will come up during our budget deliberations and goals and objectives for next year. Adam might want an answer on this one. And I'd hope that particularly in areas where there are projects being proposed and with some specific details, that we at least look at those portions of our discussions and try to reach some conclusions.
Yeah, I don't think Adam's looking for an answer on the Hawk parking that was suggested when we first were looking at the list of big picture list discussions. I think Councillor Barry had suggested that a couple of these things be folded into this to make this a bigger sort of access to water conversation. And that's why it may appear to some to be jumping around a bit, but it's all connected to access to water. So I think we will, Liz, and I would ask the CAO, do you feel that, again, there's enough for you to meet with staff and break it up into edible chunks and give it some thought? And I don't think we're looking for miracles for 2 weeks from now, but in consideration of the asset management plan and our projects and priorities discussion.
We can have a discussion around what staff see coming forward. There are definitely some questions that I have.
Of us or with staff?
A bit of both. I'm not sure, I guess, for council, if we're going to continue this discussion, I think there will be things that staff need some direction on to bring to projects and priorities, which we're hopeful will be the first week of November. So if we're going to continue this discussion, I guess my question is, when would that be? I mean, asset management will be the 15th.
Yep. I think we're kind of running out of year. Thanks to the pandemic, we've lost a lot of time to have these discussions, and the delay in the asset management plan as well. What does council think in terms of timing and fitting into our existing processes? Is council looking to solve any of these questions for this year's budget, or are we going to take time to use this year's budget to set the stage to continue these conversations on a go-forward basis? Councillor Gaillou.
I'm rather in favor of the stage setting time. I do feel quite adamant that a contextualization report would not be too onerous to create, but would at least give us a sense of what's going on at each lake in terms of current service levels, current development trajectory, current number of people on the lake, road versus water access. I think that that would really help to inform that conversation. And I wonder if that's something that we could be looking at for, for this year.
Yeah, I mean, I don't see us, to be quite honest, this is such an elephant. I don't see us taking action on, building a parking lot or deciding how to approach various landings this year. We're too close to the end of the year. And based on today's conversation, I think you're absolutely right that there's a lot more information we need to reset the table for this discussion. That's what I've heard today is, wow, like great input, great good conversations, but there's a whole bunch of pieces that we want that aren't here yet. And we need to do that first. And I think you're right. If we can get that far this year and just keep thinking and mulling and talking, with people individually, I think we'd be lucky to get that far this year. I'm going to go to Liz and then back to Jen.
I do agree that we need to have a lot more discussion, more contextualizing and putting things in as one relates to another. I think we need to, even if we need to have a special meeting just with one subject, one block or one piece of it, that we should think about trying to continue to do that, at least to try and get closer to landing on a direction or a specific philosophy. For me, for this year's budget deliberations, I really do think that maybe we should consider during our projects and priorities the idea of a small study to help gather this information that Jen's talking about, because I think it's key and important to a long-term vision for us. And that might be the one consideration for expenditures that we might decide depending on what other priorities we've got.
Mm-hmm. Well, I've taken a bunch of notes from, and I know that Angie is as well, a bunch of notes of what I'm hearing as regards this contextualization. You can't make a decision until you know what the pieces are. So if we can get the pieces together, and whether that's, Angie will have to tell us whether or not that deciding some of these things or putting these things in front of us is something staff can do, or do we look for some money in the budget to have it done by a third party? I don't know. And we haven't discussed the asset management plan. I think a lot of this will be covered, some of it will be covered in the asset management plan discussion, but there are other pieces that simply are not part of the asset management plan that I've heard today are going to be part of the conversation. Angie, what do you say on that?
If council is looking for, and this is what I'm hearing, is a conceptualization that would include information on every lake in the township, then that's considerable, obviously, and that I would say that's not possible from staff by the end of the year, given the other competing priorities with budget and projects and priorities. But I do see that as a possibility for money in the budget to hire someone to help us do that. That's huge.
Well, it is. And there's a part of me that says, really? But there's a part of me that says, I sit here meeting after meeting and say, the community is changing, the community is growing, there's development. And how are we going to decide what to provide for people if we don't do this groundwork, do this legwork ahead of time? Then we can't decide how we're going forward. Jen.
I understand Angie's point. I'm not sure it has to be huge. I think there are a lot of pieces of information that are probably available to us already, such as, my list that I have for this sort of work would be, for every lake, how many properties are there? How many of those properties are water access only? What are the development trajectory estimates or limits for those lakes? Well, that information doesn't have to come via brand new surveys. We probably can harvest that from the data that we already have, you know, in the planning department. Does it take time? Absolutely, it takes time, but it's not, I'm not convinced it would be all that onerous if given the right amount of time to do it. Where it would get a little bit more onerous would be, you know, the current practices at each lake. So who has some sort of managed system for docking and who doesn't? Who has a sort of a community code for how they moor in a small space, or who gets which parking spot? Because there are some parking lots which are, you know, they pretty much have their signs saying this property space is being used by this family, etc., and others which are more of a free-for-all. So, you know, there are elements of it that are absolutely more onerous, but I think there are some statistical elements of it that wouldn't be hugely onerous. And I'm not saying it's an, you know, it's not, I'm not saying it's a non-thing. It's a big thing, but I'm not looking for a 50-page study here. I'm looking at a quick overview piece that kind of give us a general sense, so that when we have our next conversation, like the one we had about Hardwood Landing, we can look at, oh, okay, so Hardwood Lake, there are 34 cottages, only 15 water access only, or whatever the stats are. And the cost of replacing that landing in proportion to what we're about to spend or want to spend on Hall's Hawks, wow, that's, you know, that's an interesting comparison there. And are we sure that we really want to take one lake in one direction and one lake in the other direction? The comparative would be so extremely helpful to our decision-making process.
I think we have to leave the definition of onerous to the CAO and her staff, because I don't know that information, it's not, I don't think it's a huge effort to find the number of property owners that are, I mean, addresses are listed as water access only. I don't know if you can search that or not. But the whole thing about current practices and that kind, there's a lot of work in there. So,
and that's what I meant. That's the really onerous part. Yes.
Yeah, and I mean, development trajectories, we don't have any access to that kind of information. There might be, I mean, there's a housing plan at the county level that suggests an X number of people may make their permanent residence here over the next 10 years, and that number is 5,000, but we don't know where they are in the county. So I don't think that's easy to find either. And I think it's best if we consolidate our notes and let the CAO and her staff amid their other, don't forget, we're coming into projects and priorities, which is a tremendous amount of work. The building or the planning department is ours is not the only one that's overwhelmed these days with the changes in land use and people moving here and wanting to build. And so I think we need to leave the planning of that timeline to them within their own work plans. Liz.
I think there probably is information available about the number of developable lots remaining on a lake. My question would be, do we really need to do every lake in the municipality, or do we need to look at the lakes where we have identified infrastructure and how we're going to manage and control those? That's to me a starting point.
Yeah, I agree with you. I don't think, for example, you know, the beach lake, it's got a boat ramp and people park on the road and there's lots of day users, but I don't see there being, if you want to know who's using the beach lake boat ramp, you can ask me. I look at it every day. Like there's ways to find that information, and I don't think, I'm being facetious, I don't think that we need to do it for every lake. I don't think that was the intention, is it? That we would do every lake, just the ones where we have the infrastructure and certainly where we're feeling the pressure points.
Yeah.
Well, there you go. That's a smaller job. Angie Bird.
Still.
How do staff, like I'll use beach, for example. There doesn't appear to be any issues, but there is a public beach that is used and has docks there that we don't know who they belong to. So there are issues that exist that may not be a problem per se, but they're there. So how do we differentiate that?
I would say if there, I don't know, at this point, if there's no problems, then we.
But there is.
Well,
There
that would be solved by sending a property owner a letter saying, stop telling people to get off your beach because it's not your beach.
No, that's not the problem I meant. What I meant is what we've seen more often, particularly this year with more people here, are people parking on the road, on curves. And, you know, I've seen people actually parking on the corner of Dawson Road and North Shore Road. On Dawson, like, I mean, they're parking in a place where people need to stop at a stop sign and turn left, and there's a vehicle in the way. So there are, even though it's just a small piece of infrastructure, there are issues with it, along with somebody saying that they're not allowed on public land.
Yeah, I think that can be, I mean, there's enough internal knowledge to know where there's problems.
Yeah.
There's no point in going, you know, putting a bunch of work into a place where there's no issues. And we also have to be careful not to try and, you know, slice this grape into too many pieces. Let's not turn this into a giant make work project. We've come up with some things we want to know. Let's apply them to the right locations so that we have the information to lay the groundwork for the future. Lisa, what did you have to say?
I do think taking a bit of a fulsome look at things without making it overly complicated, I do think making those projections is really important, especially when you have, especially COVID has revealed that, you know, there's a large amount of people that aren't just coming here to their cottage, but they're short-term rentals and they're, you know, camps and camping and wanting to access the water. And how are our lakes and our township able to achieve that or assist in achieving that?
Well, we also have to remember that it's not our responsibility to be everything for everybody, and everybody doesn't get, everyone doesn't get a pony. Those uses exist now, and we have to pick what our priority is. And I think the priorities are taxpayers, and secondarily is visitors, because we have a very strong tourism economy. And so, and what does that look like? So we're not going to solve that today. I mean, I think this has been, we're now 2.5 hours into this conversation. I see some lagging faces. We haven't even had a break yet. I think that we have plenty on paper for staff to, you know, talk about how to break it out and bring it back, and we'll see what it looks like. We're nowhere near concluding anything. We're only at the start of this very complicated conversation. Jennifer.
Just because there is so much on the table and we're basically offloading it on the CAO and staff, I do want to make sure that we don't forget one of the smaller elements of it, which is those municipally owned spaces which are not managed in any way, such as the Harris Road beach, the very top of Harris Road, where we're getting more intermittent travelers coming through, and they're stripping out some live trees in order to make a little campfire on the beach, and of course they have no idea when there's a fire ban or not, and there seems to be an increased use of some of those spaces that sort of slip between the cracks of our other more managed spaces. And at some point, and in the right way, I think we gotta figure out what we're doing about that. If what we're doing currently is sufficient, I would suggest for Harris Road Beach, it's not quite sufficient yet. We're gonna have to kind of step up a bit to the changing uses of that space. But it's such a small point in comparison to some of the really vast issues that we've talked about today. I just wanted to underscore it so that we don't forget it. I know the folks up here at Oxtongue and some of the other lakes in Ward 3 would like to know what's going to happen with those spaces so they don't degrade. And maybe putting that alongside the shoreline protection bylaw thinking, or I'm not sure where that belongs, but it would be great to continue it.
Yeah, I mean, maybe we land at the place where a location like that little public area at Harris Road it's closed. It's not a public beach with washrooms and picnic tables and playgrounds. It's a little weeny path to a lake that over misuse and abuse over the years has become this ugly, widened, tree stripped nothing. And it's a long way up and it's a long way down to get to it. And I think that forms part of the conversation is when there are places like that are not official public parks, they just happen to be, it's what if somebody puts a dock there? It's no different than the end of a road allowance. I would consider it as part of that. And if there are places that are remote enough that enforcement, maintenance, and environmental concerns can't be met, then maybe they get replanted and closed down. just a suggestion. Probably not a popular one, but I mean, we can't be everything to everybody. So who knows? Jen?
Sorry, and I know now is not the time that we're picking up on that. Whereas I like that idea, I also recall the snowmobilers who use it in the wintertime. So closing it and replanting it in the summer, and then snowmobile use in the wintertime. Yeah, it's tricky. It's sticky.
Okay, my head's about to explode. I'm sure everyone else's is. Very good conversation, and I'm not sure if we're any farther ahead or just really more confused.
We're further ahead, I'm
Yeah,
sure.
I think we are. We've given some direction around some policy around a couple of places, and we'll, I think if anybody has taken any notes, maybe they can just ship them to the CAO. I mean, I'll give her mine as well, and that might help form some of next steps behind the scenes. We are coming into a very busy time of year for staff with projects and priorities and the budget, so we will have to fall by the good graces of staff management to see things through. I'm going to close this conversation off so we can have a quick break, but Mr. Card, you have said very little. Is your head spinning at the moment?
I think everybody raises some excellent points, all of which are many of them that we've been able to discuss over time this summer as we've approached the various projects we've been dealing with. It definitely gives me an idea of what all the councillors are.
Oh, he's gone away.
And essentially starting to put together. Oh, can you hear me there?
Yeah, you're back now, but we missed part of you.
Okay, sorry. Yeah, as everybody's highlighted, there's a lot of challenges. Once you start digging into it, you realize that it is a big enough thing, whether or not we even just move towards having a docks and landings management plan in and of itself that include everything that we've discussed. It is a big enough project that, as Angie was discussing, we'd be looking at potentially making recommendations around a third-party organization or directing staff time specifically over even a year or more to develop some of these conversations. And I can see it coming back in stepped phases and pieces to council with different bits of that information over time with all of the points everyone has mentioned here. So there's definitely a lot to think about, and everybody now knows what we're looking at. So now there's just all the work.
There's just all the work. Okay, does anybody, I'm going to call for a mover and a seconder to receive the reports in this section, unless anybody else, oh, look at the hands are flying now. Deputy Mayor Danielson and Lisa Berry are moving and seconding the receipt of that report. Oh my God, let's have a break, they're all saying. Yes, ma'am, Liz?
Just one quick comment. I found it interesting because I pulled out the old docks and landings plan. Some of the questions raised in that old plan are still the questions that we're contemplating today. But that was my foundation for the discussion, and it was just more enhanced by all the work that you did, Carol. And I think we're going to make some progress now.
Yeah, and it really is a matter of you know, a bit of longevity, and you're right. These are not new questions, and they've been lingering because they are a big bite and have some potentially huge implications on the operational status of several departments. And are we prepared to go there or not? Eventually, we will have to, and so it's up to us to decide when we should and how we can do it. So we'll see where we land. So I have a mover and a seconder for that resolution, Madam Clerk.
Moved by Deputy Mayor Danielson, seconded by Councillor Berry. Be it resolved that Council receives report CAO 1220 regarding the strategic priorities discussion number 2, submitted by Angie Bird and dated September 17th, 2020 as information. And that Council receives report PW 4320 regarding increased parking for Big Hawk Lake Road and Little Hawk Lake Road, submitted by Adam Thorne and dated September 17th, 2020 as information.
All in favor? That's carried. Thank you. And thank you, Chris and Adam, for participating. And we are going to take a 10-minute break. It is just about 11:30, so we'll take 10 and we'll come back.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody. Apparently it's the 10-minute warning. Okay, we are back live for our council meeting. Number 9, building a bylaw business, there is none. Parks, Rec and Trail business, there's a couple of issues, so we'll bring Mr. Card back. Thanks. Welcome back, Chris.
Thank you.
First up for you is it's just really acknowledgement of the agreement and the bylaw for the Youth Ranger program, which occurred again this year.
Yeah, so better late than never. After running the program, we did receive word that we are getting funding again this year for the program, which is fantastic. So a little over $36,000 to fund the Ranger team this year. And this will allow a bylaw to be passed for us to enter into agreement to facilitate the funds transfer. And then I'll be submitting that along with some other documentation to finalize all of that for the year. Something else that I've added to this, just so that council can see it and be aware, as it may be some time since everyone's had the opportunity to look at the Ranger Partner Guidelines, is it just goes into the details surrounding what the parameters are for operating the program. And I'd just like to highlight a couple of things, if I can, very quickly. And I'm just scrolling through it, so bear with me. We have obligations for both training and partnerships. And page 5 outlines some of the parameters around partnerships and the role of us as coordinators in relation to that. And then page 9 talks about training. So the reason I highlight it is around when we're operating a Stewardship Youth Ranger program group, there's also an expectation that we create partnerships with third-party organizations outside of our own organization to be able to offer them work and also go into this type of learning program. And what we've set up is what I refer to as work and learn days. So we have a number of community partners, such as the Dorset Environmental Center, where they do acid rain research, Abbey Gardens, a local wildlife rescue shelter that we've been able to partner with, the MNRF on various aspects. And several times over the year, we have this Ranger crew team up with some of those organizations to help them implement some work plans that they have needing done, while also offering them an educational component, because we are required to create an atmosphere where we're offering the Rangers 10% of their time throughout the year as an educational component to educate them both on environmental issues, parks management, and how they all kind of relate with the intent that you're trying to introduce them to the career option and opportunity that is environmental sciences and environmental stewardship, etc. So there is time in July and August where we are facilitating those kind of outside partnerships and developing this training and educational program. And I just wanted to bring that again to council's attention to make sure they're aware of the full details of the program.
Yeah, thank you for that. I think it's important for that reminder to come to us once in a while, and I confess that it had slipped my mind. And it's great, hopefully, the opportunity to be in the Ranger program and participate in those learning days. Maybe, lets the young people choose a different path or that path in life to get into outdoor education or forestry or anything like that. So that's terrific. Any questions from council on what Chris has told us or on the transfer payment? May I have a mover and a seconder to receive that? Councillor Berry, Deputy Mayor Danielson.
Moved by Councillor Berry, seconded by Deputy Mayor Danielson. Be it resolved that council receives a verbal report from Chris Card regarding the Stewardship Youth Ranger Transfer Payment Agreement, and further that council directs the bylaw be tabled for further consideration.
All in favor? That's carried. Thank you. Next up for you, Chris, is our annual letter and donation from the Stanhope Senior Slammers.
Yeah, so the Stanhope Senior Slammers, for anyone who's not aware, is a group who plays tennis regularly at our courts in Stanhope, and they have for a number of years. And they have a wonderful group, and they're out almost every day all summer long. This year they're pushing it right into the fall, longer than they typically would, which is great because a lot of them just aren't able to travel, which they'd typically be doing this time of year. But they have a membership fee that they collect just as a rough organization amongst themselves to be able to purchase things like balls and rackets and things that actually help out their experience there, such as windscreens. They've been able to help us fund some new nets and some squeegees to squeegee off the court, etc. Every year, any surplus funds they have, they donate to us. So I have sent an email back to them thanking them for their generous donation again. And I'd just like to commend them openly this year in that, of course, with all of the challenges associated with COVID, we had to put various rules and restrictions in place. And they've been fantastic to work with. We haven't had any hiccups. And they've even implemented some of their own processes above and beyond what's been required at the provincial level to ensure the safety of all of their participants. And it's great to also see that they're saying they have some new players out and some new youth players out this year. So thank you to them, and I commend them for just being excellent to work with through this pandemic as well.
Yeah, again, that's terrific. And so we will be able to leave the nets up a little longer this year, seeing as there's not the great south migration occurring.
Yeah, we'll leave them up essentially as long as the weather allows. There will be a point in time that we have to do fall maintenance, and we'll coordinate that with them. But as long as they want to keep coming out and then the snow doesn't hit and we have to switch directions, they'll still be able to play.
Great. Any questions or comments for Chris about this? May I have a mover and a seconder to receive the donation? Councillor Dayu and Deputy Mayor Danielson.
Moved by Councillor Dayu, seconded by Deputy Mayor Danielson. Be it resolved that council acknowledges with appreciation a donation in the amount of $300 from the Stanhope Seniors Tennis Group.
All in favor? That is carried. Thank you. And lastly, for you, Chris, is Sean coming in on this? Do we know?
Only if there's questions that I can't answer related to the merging, etc. But I am knowledgeable and on those reports, and I can speak to it.
Okay.
So it's up to you.
Yeah, if we get somewhere that you're not familiar, I mean, you guys work together on this, so if we get somewhere that you're a bit jammed up, we can ask Sean to stick his face on the screen for us. The Ox Tongue Lake privy location and lot merger. Chris, take us away.
Yeah, so bear with me because there are a number of attachments and supporting documentation associated with this. So council will recall that in May we reviewed the location of the privy as we've been making property improvements at the outdoor space at the Oxtongue Community Center. This was associated with the installation of the pavilion. When we installed the privy, some voices were raised around the proximity of the privy to the picnic pavilion.
Chris, we've lost your audio.
Different.
Oh, he's back.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah, you vanished there for a minute.
I moved my phone up into the window, so hopefully it gets a better signal up there. So challenge with moving the privy further away, of course, is that we own 2 different lots and you can't put a septic system on a lot without a primary dwelling or building there. So council received information from planning and myself in May regarding the considerations around a severance and merger in order to facilitate the movement of that privy, and asked that we're able to take that information, or sorry, not that information, but go back to the Oxtongue Lake Community Center Committee to get their feedback and recommendations on the placement. So first, what you'll see on the agenda on September 14th, the committee was able to gather on site. We had a wonderful outdoor socially distanced meeting where we were able to go over considerations for placement. They've made recommendations, which I then am able to highlight in the attachments after that on a layout map, and then following that, all of the information around the severance and merger considerations. So what I will do at this point is direct council to the second attachment, being OLCC minutes recommended layout map. And I'm just getting there myself. And this is on page 1, a satellite image overview with a layout of all of the current structures, buildings, and proposed privy location. At the same time, because when you start talking about the location of the privy, you can't help but also consider how it's relative to the swing set that we've budgeted for to be installed. We tore out an old swing set, a new one will be going in. So on the page 1 map, the yellow square is the proposed privy location relative to the lot line. To the left and above that is where committee was giving feedback on proposed installation location of the swing set. And that shows it all in relation to the pavilion that's been installed, as well as the existing privy location. I've laid that out in a little bit more detail with measurements on the second page to show the proximity to lot lines, drilled well, which has minimum setback requirements for any sort of septic system. In this case, it's a holding tank, as well as the distance from the pavilion. All of committee was in agreement on this particular location. And of course, to facilitate that, council has 2 options, and that is to, if we can move to one, two, three, 4, the attachment being the PRT 017 option 2 aerial this outlines where the lots lie and what is being recommended to facilitate the movement of the privy to that back lot. So on this, you'll see that the Oxtongue Community Center and the fire hall are on one lot, and then behind it is an adjacent L-shaped lot. And in discussions with planning and the CAO in the spring when we were looking at this, we'd like to suggest the option to council that we sever the highlighted portion and then merge it with the adjacent lot at 3979 in order to facilitate the privy moving back there. The alternate option would be to merge the two lots in their entirety, which would eliminate the cost and the requirement of having a survey done. You would still have to merge the two lots, but by maintaining the two separate lots, it does offer more opportunities down the road for if council has ideas or thoughts around different types of development or possible sale or any other number of opportunities at that other adjacent lot, without at the same time having to take it away from essentially the community center property. So there are some costs associated with that. And what I'm looking for from council now is direction on whether or not the desire would be to sever and merge, move the privy to the location recommended by the committee, or just merge the two lots and still move the privy to the recommended location.
Deputy Mayor Danielson would like to say something. Go ahead, please.
The one piece of information I can't determine from this, and maybe I've missed it, is the distance from where the privy is now to where it's going, or what the proposed spot location is. I have some. I really like the idea of severing off a portion of the L-shaped lot. I think that even though there are some more costs associated with it, it leaves us with many more options in the future for how we might want to use that land. Or gosh, I mean, we might even want to sell it. I do like I expect that the privy would be further back, but I like the idea of it being behind, kind of tucked in behind the trees. And if there's a nice enough separation, I wish I'd been there myself to see it. The fact that it's tucked in behind the tree, that it's a little more private and not visible to the traveling public going by. I kind of like that too, even though they might be screaming for a washroom. And the only other thought that I've got is that I'm wondering about the proposed future placement of the swing set. It seems to be right in the smack dab in the middle in front of, you know, the new portion of the lot. And I'm wondering if it might not be a little, I mean, we've got time to talk about that, but I'm just wondering if it might be a little better off a little bit further over to the side of the property towards the community center, just so that it's not so front and center, hampering for some long period of time other things that we might want to do.
Okay, thoughts from other members of council? I know, I mean, Jen and Lisa were there, so I don't know if they have to say very much because their thoughts are presented here on the paper. Jen, did you have your hand up or not? Yeah, you did.
Yeah, I do. I want to thank Chris and Sandra for facilitating this conversation and for listening to what the committee had to say and taking it on board so completely. I really do think this is a great solution. And yes, Deputy Mayor, there certainly there's some wiggle room there, and whether the playground goes a little bit further to the right or further to the left, absolutely. I think that can be looked at in time. But when you stand at the pavilion, which is, you know, our brand new thing, our brand new investment in that area, and you look around at those other proposed facilities, there is there is a really natural flow to it. So you know, you look over to the left and you just get a tiny hint that, oh, there must be a toilet right there, but you're not actually looking fully at the toilet. And the playground is a little bit further removed, but still close enough that someone can be picnicking in the shade and also have a full view on what their child is doing on the playground. There's a real natural flow. And if you look at the map, you'll see that there is still ample space for all the events that Oxtongue Lake is proposing. This year we sadly couldn't have them, but there was a community dance planned, and there was a plein air artist event planned, and OLAC had some idea. You know, there's a lot that the community really still wants to do with that space, and I think that what's been proposed and is before you today would really facilitate that. It's quite a dignified little space. I think you'll be pleased with the result. But I agree, Deputy Mayor, you know, we can still fandangle a little bit here, a little bit there, but still in keeping with the general spirit of what's been proposed by the community.
Madam CAO, do I see your hand up there?
Yes, you do. Thank you. I just have a question. So from the layout, it appears that the the new location will be sort of tucked in behind. Is there going to be signage or anything for the public to know that they're there? Because I know obviously during fall colors, there's always a demand for public washrooms. I know for myself, I'm an avid hiker, and you know, you're out and about and you're always looking for those locations. So it would be, I think, valuable if there was signage, if it's going to be tucked back in like that.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. I mean, we need to remember that it's not a private washroom for users of that property only, and we've put a lot of work into trying to address challenges with, especially during the fall season, with folks looking for washrooms or places to park. So perhaps the committee members could speak a little bit to that, and I would defer to the parents on council about the privy being out of eyesight from the pavilion. Is that a concern at all? Those couple things, if either of you can speak to that. I'll go to Lisa first.
I think that seeing it on a map and seeing it standing there is a little bit different. I think that the sight lines are still there, especially now with the playground. I think you know, your kids are now closer to the forest than a parking lot, which, you know, is a concern. And I think a well thought out plan. And I also think that there was some mention when we were standing there about, so if these privies all of a sudden became overly used, especially during fall colors, then how do they become overly cleaned? So I think it's a case of, we want to have them there for the community, but do we want to have a billboard that says washrooms over here and then have staff doing more maintenance on them? I don't know.
Well, you know, I'm not going to die on this hill, but I go back to the angst and all the effort that went into the fact that we have worked with Ontario Parks and the OPP and MTO for additional washrooms along Highway 60, because of, and I'll just be very frank, because of the problems of people driving 3 and 4 hours to get to the park, being delayed, and you know, using private property rose bushes and wood piles as bathrooms. So now that we have an opportunity to put a bathroom in place, how do we balance definitely the maintenance and capacity challenges with it, with the fact that we're spending a lot of money to protect private property from such uses, and now we have a facility that might help that, but we're going to keep it private. So I see both sides to it, and I just want to make sure we're not making the decision for the wrong reasons. That's all. Considering the effort that's gone into trying to find ways to accommodate travelers having a fall color or other experience along the route. Jen, can you speak to that maybe?
Yeah, we did have a good conversation about this at the meeting, and there is certainly an acknowledgement in the committee members that yes, this space, it's not just for the good folk of Oxtongue Lake, it is for people to come in and enjoy. Certainly after OLAC put those, their beautiful big display posters up about the group of seven's impact on the lake and that connection. The whole idea is to draw people into that space and enjoy the space, the pavilion, the display, the bathrooms, everything. What the consensus feeling was by the end of the conversation, though, was to treat it hopefully more like the parquet, which is not too far down the road from where the pavilion is, wherein the draw is the beautiful environment and the pavilion and the the picnic tables, and that will bring the weary traveler off the road. And once they're there, you look to the left, oh, there are the toilets too. But the draw, the welcoming is the pavilion. So we didn't discuss the sign at the meeting. I looked to council's thoughts on that. Not sure if that's something that we could perhaps take back to the committee or not, or if that's more of a township decision, but certainly the committee is more than willing to, that's not the right word because it's not entirely their decision, but they certainly aren't trying to hide it from the traveling public. They're trying to make that whole space amenable to the traveling public, but more as a parquet where you come to enjoy the rest, and there's also those facilities there. That was sort of the compromise thinking behind the location.
And I guess in reality, it doesn't matter, because as soon as that preview location is discovered, it will be widely shared through social media, but then hopefully people will realize that you can, the weary traveler, you can stop and have a rest and spend some time before moving on. So, I mean, we can't micromanage it to death. It'll turn out to be what it's going to be. I think Lisa Berry had her hand up.
I just wonder, do we advertise washrooms for any of other facilities? I know I've seen the picnic table icon, but I don't remember seeing the probably dated now washroom symbols.
Yeah, I don't think we do. Yeah, I mean, again, it's it can be considered a bit of a nickel and diming question, but just curious as to the reasoning behind it. My question though is, given where it is, I know it's not a huge distance. It needs to go to the accessibility committee for consideration. Do we have any idea that could be additional costs? Because the accessibility committee, which actually I'm on, will require a certain pathway to meet accessibility standards. And do we have any idea of what needs to be put down there? The further away it is, the more it costs. Is it $5 or $5,000 or $50,000? Any ideas at all? Anybody? Chris, you've done this kind of thing before. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, so it does have to go to the accessibility committee, and that is the next step. And my intent would be to ask them what they suggest around the pathway access. And my suggestion would be to use the same thing that we've used at the Stanhope setup, where there's a 6 foot wide crushed granite compacted surface, which is widely used in similar applications throughout the province. But getting their input on that, and it is something that we did identify as part of the project at the outset and was within the project budget. It would have to be done probably at the same time that we are able to finalize plans around the swing set, and it would be, you'd be talking in the several $1,000 range, not the tens of thousands of dollar range.
So the cost, the financial impact indicated on today's report is exclusive of those next steps.
That's right.
Just so we know that, because we don't want to have an item come forward to pay for a gravel path and say, where did that come from? Deputy Liz.
I'm just wondering where the swing set / playground, I hear two different terms, is on the budgeting cycle. Are we budgeting for it now, or that's just a future consideration?
I think Chris is going to answer that.
Yeah, so it was identified as a capital project this year, funded from available reserves. It is not going to be able to be finalized this year, largely because of all of the holdups with the pandemic. So I would suggest that projects and priorities just moving that project ahead a year, barring any unforeseen circumstances with the pandemic, but it's not new money. It is planned to be funded from reserves. And in answer to the swing set versus playground, the intent in the budget was for a swing set that meets current standards and accessibility code.
And if I recall, was that not estimated to be around 25,000?
That's
Yeah.
correct.
Yeah, okay. Okay, well, that's coming forward later. I mean, we're, slowly but surely making improvements in that location. So does anybody else have anything on the Privy location? So we're going with the severance and merger. I think that's wise. As has been mentioned, there's an opportunity to develop that property, sell that property. Who knows what needs there will be for fire services in the future. So it's always nice to hang on to a piece of land just in case it's needed. So is everybody okay with that part? Nod, nod, nod. Good. Great. May I have a mover and a seconder to receive this report as presented? Councillor Dayu, of course, and Deputy Mayor Liz Danielson. You're on mute, Madam Clerk.
I apologize. Moved by Councillor Dayu, seconded by Deputy Mayor Danielson. Be it resolved that Council receives report PRT 1720 submitted by Chris Card and dated October 1st, 2020 regarding the Oxtongue Lake Community Centre Privy location, and that Council hereby receives direct staff to proceed with moving the Privy to the location recommended by the Oxtongue Lake Community Centre Committee, and that Council hereby directs staff to include the lot severance and merger as outlined in the report PL 2020 in the 2021 budget.
All in favor? That's carried. Thank you. Thanks, Chris, and thanks for your participation this morning too for our big picture discussion.
Thank you.
Public Works business is next. We'll bring in Mr. Thorne. I tell you, the part I miss about meeting in person is by now we'd be sitting down and eating food. A wee bit peckish. Welcome back, Adam.
Thank you.
Well, talking about spending money, just a little preamble is just through with the longevity issue is we've sort of always planned to eventually land somewhere like this. How fast we get there depends on what council decides today. So I will leave it to Adam to take us through his report.
Thank you. Well, as you know, we are a very forward-looking township. And in 2015, we started with the transfer station in Dorset. At the end of its landfilling capacity, it was turned into the transfer station that it is now. The next step was we looked at Hawk Lake, and as it was nearing its end of life, we took steps into ensuring that we move forward into that landfill, and as a result, the closure of it, and that was all finalized here just recently. The next step for us is the Maple site. Back in 2011, when the expansion of Maple was brought forward, it was shown as this could be the next step for the Maple site, is that this operations center, we would like to call it, would be made available somewhere along down the life span of the Maple Lake waste site. Currently, as the report reflects, that site has approximately 70 years left in it. And if you can bear with me with this report, I know it's a big chunky report with a lot of moving parts in it. And to basically sum it up is that every year staff have to go in there, and throughout the year we spend multiple hours moving around on the site. The original end of life for this landfill is essentially a pyramid, if you will, to make it easy. And we can't go the entire length of the lifespan of that landfill site because we would eventually have to get off of it to continue landfilling. So the layout of the site itself isn't great. It's not efficient for site users or for staff that have to continually move around on the site. So over the last couple of years, we spent quite a few hours in that landfill, building walls and creating spots to help make it a better flow, a more efficient flow, if you will. And slowly we've been gobbling up the area with waste. So what we're proposing here is to move off of the mound. Sometime within the span of that 70 years, we're going to have to do that. So we're proposing that we do that definitely sooner than later. And by doing that, we would create this operations center off the mound, but still within township property, that would create a site that we would not have to go into and redesign down the road. So we're not building this operations center for tomorrow or for next month or for next year. We're building it for the life of that site and beyond. As some of you might have questions regarding the Blue Box program and producer responsibility and where that might end up in the big picture of things. And unfortunately, at this time, it is unknown to us at what that's going to roll out and look like. However, this operations center would be able to be very appealing to a producer that would come along, say, to Algonquin Highlands and want to put something together. So we have put in some contingencies in that regard that would allow for expansion if that was needed. And at the end of the day, we're always going to be bringing material to a landfill. We want to get rid of that dump feeling, right? Everybody thinks of these sites as dumps because that's what they were. And we want to get away from that and start showing community site users that these are landfill sites, these are operation centers, these are clean, welcoming areas for people to do the right thing when they get inside the gate, that they can go to these areas and they be designed a certain way that creates efficient flow. Maple site, just off the top, some of my notes here, on average, the max is 355 cars a day we've seen in that site. So the average is, about 90 cars. So, this site would reflect that as well, a nice flow, efficient flow, so traffic can get in and out as quick as possible. On top of that, it's the scale. The scale is a big portion of this operations center. As the report reflects in that as well, the scale we would have to change around the way we structure our fees and charges for what's being brought into the site, going back to basically a pay-per-use, what you bring in. So as the report reflected, right now, we do see that we're losing out on that material coming in, that it's actually costing us much more to send that material out than what we're actually getting in. So, the ratepayer that doesn't bring in C&D material, as an example, essentially is being charged for that material going out as a cost to them, because that's a cost that we can't recover just yet. So the weigh scale is almost the biggest point of this. And if we were to introduce a weigh scale in the current system, in the current layout that we have now, it's going to require a redesign of the current site. And that would mean building new roads. That would mean prepping the site for a scale, which could be, in the ranges of anywhere from $400,000 to $500,000 for a site reconfiguration over the next couple of years at that site on the mound. And I find that very hard to accept, because we're going to end up moving it off the site again anyways. So over the course of that potentially 70 years. So this operation design center is, like I said, has a lot of moving parts, but it captures a lot of efficiencies that we see here in moving forward with this site.
Thank you for that. This is a lot to consider. And as I said, I think that, I remember when I'd be just being on council and waiting 8 years to get the approval for the expansion. I believe has always been the intention to end up somewhere like this. It's like our conversation this morning. It's a big bite. $1 million is in the world is not a lot of money, but it's a lot of money for us. So I guess the issue for council is, Are you interested in pursuing this long-term plan for the Maple site? I know this summer with the closure of the Hawk site, I did field quite a number of complaints about sort of inefficiencies at the site, and it's too small, and you have to line up, and there aren't enough people, and it's awkward to use, and this would address all of those problems. And then if council does support moving in this direction, then which option? And I think what Adam's looking for is, whether to take the big bite all at once, which we would discuss further at projects and priorities, and certainly at budget time. There's an opportunity to use the modernization money, and I think Adam is looking for getting scales in sooner than later, and looking for council's thoughts on all of those things. Actually, before I say that, one thing I would love to have a further conversation about is, I've been asking about this for a number of years, is expanding the size and parameters of the reuse shed. I think that there is a tremendous amount of goods that are ending up in the dump, and I think I would love to see us have a more robust relationship with diversion and reuse, and whether that's a partnership, exploring a partnership with the Thrift Warehouse or other organizations. If that could in any way be part of how we move forward around our landfills, I would love that part of it. I had Lisa's hand first, I think, and then I'm going to go to Jen.
I completely support this in principle. I would like to read the entire asset management plan before I make any financial decision on this, but I do support it in principle. The one I didn't have a chance to speak with Adam, but I did get a chance to speak with Melissa. And one of my questions to her was, would this plan allow for other areas of collection? Because we don't know if in 2 years we're all of a sudden going to have to collect all those awful plastic chairs, or if we're going to have to collect things for a different company. And she said that that's the whole idea. And the one thing that was missing from the drawing was, I was like, well, where will I take my garbage? That's what the part I didn't understand, but now I understand that it would be taken to a bin. And then once the bin was full, then it would be emptied and covered at the same time. So there would be no more littering blowing around, which is ideal. So those are sort of my two thoughts. Is I support this, but I'd like to see the full impact. I'd almost rather support this in project and priorities after looking at the asset management plan.
Fair enough. Councillor Dayu.
I certainly support what Lisa has just said. I do support it in principle. I'm a bit leery to make any decision before we have the project and priorities conversation and see how it would fit into our upcoming budget. So, I certainly agree with Lisa on that front. My conceptual thought dovetails actually quite nicely with what you've said, Mayor Moffat, and also what Lisa said. I was thinking as I was reading through this report that there are a lot of planning processes which take into consideration a desire to encourage certain consumer behaviors. So when you're in a supermarket, they'll put the chocolate cereals on the bottom shelf of the cereals, or in a brand new subdivision, they'll sometimes put the bike path as the most efficient way to get across the subdivision to the train station, for example, because there's this desire to encourage a certain consumer behavior with that planning process. And I wonder what the scope is for thinking about our green responsibilities and our desire to reduce landfill and increase our recyclables, et cetera, if there's a way of exemplifying that or manifesting that intention through this design, so that the way that you flow through the site is encouraging you to recycle more and to dump less. And I'm not asking necessarily for an answer on that right now. It's one of those overarching thoughts that I think, this could be a real opportunity for us to look for ways to encourage best behavior.
Yeah, I mean, I just to sort of reiterate what I just said. For years, I said just because it's a dump doesn't mean it has to be dirty, and over time, it's remarkably improved in that regard. This would take it to the next step for sure. and I think there's a tremendous opportunity to educate people, to provide some behavior modification information in conjunction with an education program from the Environment Stewardship Committee. There's a lot we can do together on that. And I will say too that something that I fielded a number of calls about, just on my own little piece of the world here at Beach Lake, is not unlike the situation they had in Minden. The seagulls are a nightmare, and they're coming from the landfill. And I sent Adam a note the other day from my personal email address. It was almost like, "Dear Mr. Thorne, I'm a taxpayer." The seagulls are bringing they're bringing food garbage from the dump, and they're packing a lunch and they're eating it on people's docks and boats and rafts. And my neighbor didn't use their raft all summer because it's covered in bones, and that the seagulls have brought from the landfill. So Adam had said, that's when I first found out that this was coming. And he said, until we get closed bins, I know there's problems on Maple as well. And I grew up here as a kid. I am, as Liz said, I'm one of those people, been here for 4 generations. There were never seagulls here when I was a kid. And now they're as big as, they're like turkeys because they live at the landfill. And there's a lot of damage being done to people's valuable property. And I hear an awful lot about it. So I certainly would be happy that the day comes when the gulls have to move off because the food source has been primarily eliminated. It's a huge problem. Lisa Berry.
I'm just wondering if Adam mentions in his report about the modernization funding to support the scales, and I just wonder, is there any other sort of green stream funding or something that would this project might fit into as far as opportunities for shovel ready project with green initiatives?
I believe the second round of the provincial green money is coming. Is it not, Adam?
Yes, I believe it is. And I was just trying to look down in here. So underneath the financial section of the report, financial impact, the last paragraph does speak to, that staff and Cambium have investigated some funding opportunities to offset some of these projects. It is very difficult for this site to apply for some of those initiatives because of a lot of these green ones speak to like organic recycling, things of that nature. And obviously we don't have that in place. So at this time, we could not find any option for funding. Not saying that might something a year, 6 months, 9 months down the road might not come along. Having said that, how long do we wait before, a funding opportunity comes along?
Yeah, we might not. And I'm just sorry, I'm just flicking through my notes. I did, when MPP Laurie Scott phoned to advise about the $275,000 that Algonquin Highlands was receiving through the provincial COVID distribution. We did speak a little bit later about that, and I'm not going to say too much because I didn't get it right, but I'm not going to get it right. There was federal money being distributed that was, I think you would apply for, and it was for COVID related things. And I believe that the MPP said that it isn't actually money, and that she would have to decide whether she offers her community the second round of green stream or the COVID money through the feds, because there's only one pool of money, and it has to go in 2 places. So we'll circle back and ask for a few more details for clarification on that, because if that second round of green stream funding is being dropped this fall, then that is something that I don't think there's a date for it yet. And I don't know if Liz, if you know anything about that as warden, but that's something we could look into. Give your hand up, Liz. There you go.
Yeah, a number of things. First of all, just in response to that, the Warden's Caucuses, I think I might have mentioned before that they're looking at trying to approach the province and discuss the possibility for the need to use COVID funding for some capital projects, or to help with capital projects. And we don't have a response to that. I don't know about green stream funding. I did want to say a couple of things. I can see This is kind of expected, unexpected. This particular project, I can see there's been a lot of work and thought gone into it, and it's a really good report, Adam. I personally support scenario number 2. I just can't see this expenditure all in one big whack. It's just so much money. And before I would agree to using modernization funding, I guess I'd like to see just where we are with the modernization fund, how much has been spent, how much we've got left.
We have about $300,000 left.
300.
It's about 300, is it not,
Okay.
Angie? Yeah.
It is.
Yes.
I've got to say that I really have mixed feelings about some of the issues that are coming before us under the service delivery review, but waste management is one of them. And to make a decision, before we've even heard the service delivery report, it might be getting ahead of the game. Although ultimately I see us doing this no matter what. I just, I think maybe the timing, as well as the fact that we still have projects and priorities ahead of us to balance things out against, that I just can't see us making a decision about it right now. But if we were to, I'd be going for scenario number 2.
Thank you for that. And in terms of the modernization money, I did ask how much was left and was advised it's about 300,000. And the question that I asked the other day that we just don't have yet is, we had a lot of potential plans for the modernization money in order to modernize internal operations, software and different things. I certainly would like to see if there are any projects that have not yet been implemented that could be used with modernization money. Modernization money is running out, and we've been very, very careful how we spent it. It was 532,000 or whatever the exact amount was. And so the remainder of the modernization money would I'm assuming eat up the rest of would be eaten up by the scales, but but losing what else? So maybe that's something, Angie, if you can speak to it now, or we can get that information later, is to say if this was to move ahead using the modernization money at some point, then what else are we not doing that had been considered for the modernization money? Because we can't do it all. And so that, I think maybe that's part of the equation as well. In terms of option A or option B, I don't know. I would probably just take the big bite and go big or go home. But I don't think we're prepared to make that decision today. That's not what I'm hearing from council, and that we want to wait to see what comes forward in projects and priorities. And again, the asset management plan, I think it's in our best interest to hold off on any huge decisions like this until we see how much money is attached to the long-term plan through the asset management plan. There's a lot of dollars in there, and their priorities, right? So I think that's what I'm hearing, unless anybody wants to say anything differently. No, seeing either everyone's frozen or no one's saying anything. So Adam, were you hoping today that you would get an answer on some portion of this, on scales? Were you hoping to get an answer on scales today?
Well, this project is a very large project, of course, and the sooner we can get moving on this project, definitely the sooner it gets put in place, and the sooner we can start recouping that money we're losing in the C&D that goes out every year. I mean, yesterday we took 90 cubic yards of C&D waste. So, to try to recoup that money, the scale is definitely the way to go. And unfortunately, like I said earlier, trying to put the scale on the current site, it's throwing money out the window. So it would be nice to get moving forward on this sooner than later. But at the end of the day, I completely respect and understand that waiting for the asset management plan, and that's a big picture discussion coming up. I would just like to know that a lot of this funding could potentially come from the landfill reserve. So, although we don't want to deplete that to absolutely nothing, the budget, the project could be funded through the reserve and a bit of modernization funding to help offset those costs. Now, the only thing I think that we definitely need to keep in mind when it comes to our landfill sites is the closure of Hawk, which is going to happen in 2022. So it closes next year, 2021, but it actually closes and gets capped and everything like that in 2022. So we need to ensure that we have enough money to cover that in the reserve. And currently there's only roughly about $50,000 sitting in the reserve for the Hawk Lake landfill closure. So I believe the estimated value of the closure was around 250,000. So we're still looking at another 200 to bring in. So, we would have to look at the reserves and maybe move through them a little bit to try and shuffle some money around to complete this project. But my thoughts to it is it's either we spend it now or we wait a couple of years and then this project just gained 15%. Due to waiting, because we've already seen costs go up with the borders being closed and things of that nature. So if it's a reserve funded project, I personally think it's easier to do that now than later. But at the end of the day, it's this group's decision.
Yeah, let's remember that now doesn't necessarily mean today.
Yep.
We do have, the big asset management plan, which I certainly know I've skimmed, and then fell off my chair. I think we need to look, based on what I'm hearing and what I feel we should do is maybe look at let's clarify the green stream intake with the provincial government through our MPP. Maybe Angie, if we could have a bit of a financial plan, the information around what other projects we were considering under modernization, if in fact there were still any outstanding, and what that would look like in the gains and balances for that, and just make sure that maybe this comes back with some of those better details for clarification at projects and priorities, which is really only a month away. So would that satisfy council, just to know that you're looking at all the buttons before you press one? I think I'm seeing some nodding heads. So it's about moving ahead and taking the community where it needs to be for the future. I think we're having some big picture and more strategic long-term discussions, which is terrific. And but we need to do it a bit bite by bite. So that's what I'm hearing is we'll circle this back at PNP with some other details that council can consider for a direction. Is that okay? Yes. Good. All right, is there anything further on Adam's report today? As Liz said, Adam, huge amount of work, and thank you for it. Sometimes we have to push at the boundaries to get to where we need to be. May I have a mover and a seconder for that report? Lisa Berry and Councillor or Deputy Mayor Danielson.
Moved by Councillor Berry, seconded by Deputy Mayor Danielson. Be it resolved that Council acknowledges receipt of Public Works Report PW 4220 regarding the proposed Maple Lake Landfill Site Operations Center redevelopment submitted by Adam Thorne and dated October 1st, 2020, and that Council defers the decision following the asset management plan presentation and projects and priorities discussions.
All in favor of that? That's carried. Thank you.
Adam had his hand up for a comment.
Oh, thank you for that, Mr. Thorne.
Sorry for the late reply in there, but thank you very much. And this report had many hands in on it, and it was a lot of time spent. And I just wanted to say thank you, and thank you to everyone that helped out with it. It was, like I said, it's a big report.
It is, and extend our thanks to Melissa as well, please. So next up for you is you just want all kinds of money today. The purchase of two. Pre-purchase, I think they're due to be replaced anyway, but get moving on that. So take us through that, please.
Yes, it's just at the end of the life cycle of the equipment. So again, it's a purchase of two single axle trucks that were purchased in 2011, February of 2011. They're just coming to the end of their service life, as most of our equipment does, and I would like to, given the restraints that we've found when purchasing vehicles lately, pickup trucks especially, is that there is a rather large delay in the ordering of them. So if I could get council's approval today, I would like to tender these trucks right away, and then have a delivery date of as soon as possible in early 2021. Now, these trucks are replacing two current model Ford 450 2-ton trucks. They have sanders and plows on them. Only the trucks and the plows would be replaced, not the sander units. We would reuse those.
And these were scheduled and they're at a reserve, so there will be no real dollar financial impact on the as yet not discussed budget.
That is correct.
Yeah, I think I saw Liz's hand there, and I knew I saw Jen's hand, but Liz is going first and then Jen.
I'm sorry, when I put my hand up, I can see my whole hand but I guess that maybe your view is not the same as mine.
See across the bottom where it says the name?
Yeah.
Your hand is often, I can't see, I can only see the tips because all I see is you're so close to your camera that I can't see your hand unless you put it way up because of your name across the bottom of the screen. That's all. So please.
I'll try and work on that. I'll work on that. I'm glad. My only concern about these, and I know that this is standard practice for us to pre-order in order to get delivery in a subsequent year. And the only concern that I had was that I didn't want to see money coming out of this year's budget for something that we would be normally paying for next year. But if it's all coming out of reserves, I guess that kind of takes care of that concern.
Yeah, I think so.
Yep.
Councillor Dayu. Oh, you're on mute.
Darn, we missed that.
Sorry, yeah, sorry.
She was singing.
I'm probably just circling the horse one more time because you've both alluded to this, but so the intention then that during the next budget round, these purchases would still be made from reserve? Has that always been the intention? Or is it only a reserve question now because we want to bring the decision a little bit forward?
Typically, I would bring this decision to council at the budget discussions. And then with approval, we would go out after that and tender a vehicle, which in past practice usually puts the vehicle right around June, July when we retrieve the vehicle. Given this type of vehicle, it's very similar. It's a smaller scale, but it's very similar to our frontline plows, our tandem plows. So the sooner we can get them in place and get them used, well, then, that reduces the maintenance costs as we see going into the winter usually starts to increase.
Yes, my question was more about the finances though. If we were starting our budget conversation today and our big binder was there and everything else, would you have been recommending that we pull this from reserve if we were in March right now, or would you have been proposing that this come from new money?
This would be from reserve.
It would always be from reserve. Okay, I was really sure I understood that, but I just wanted to be absolutely certain. Okay, that's fine. Thank you.
And the good news about the equipment reserves is they self-populate every year. So as long as we're sure that we don't pull out more money than we put in, we're still ahead of the game. Councillor Barry, you're on mute.
Sorry, I support the purchase and it coming from reserve. My question is there an opportunity to tender this with some of the other townships? I know you've done that before. I just wondered if that was a consideration. And I'm going to ask the same question with the next item. So.
Yes, of course. And typically we would do that. And unfortunately, no one's purchasing one this year. This late in the year. The County of Haliburton did purchase 2 trucks in early before COVID, and they have taken delivery of them. So the trucks are very similar to what the county just picked up. And I would just use their tender. I've already spoken to them about it because the trucks they received are great. So I would take a lot of the information from their tender and share that into mine, and we would submit that out.
And Adam, there will be, I'm sure it's in here, there will be an offset, they'll be surplused and sold on gov deals or something. Will there be or traded in? I know that's mentioned on the backhoe, but what are we doing with these trucks?
Yes, typically equipment, like backhoes, graders, things of that nature, we generally trade those in with the purchase of a new vehicle. But when it comes to pickup trucks and dump trucks and things of that nature, we usually use an outside source like Gov Deals to get rid of the equipment. It seems to be very very beneficial to the township going through that route. And if I may also step back for a second and speak to something that Mayor Moffat has said regarding the reserves. Although every year we do put money forth into those reserves, there are years that we do spend more than what we put in, just given the type of equipment that we're purchasing, whether it's a dump truck and a pickup or multiple vehicles in one year. So, but there are years where we only spend a very small portion of it. And a lot of the equipment purchases in past and in future will align with the asset management plan, as we just spent quite a bit of time putting that together.
Yeah, there's quite a complex capitalization plan attached to the asset management plan. So that should help make some of those decisions. Luckily, we've always been very good guardians of the reserves. So that stands us in good stead. Lisa Barry and then Liz Danielson.
Just a final question. It just came to me right now. As far as like succession planning with other departments and their trucks and everything, was there a conversation with some of the other departments whether they would be needing a truck without a plow, or would any of these be suitable in any of the other departments?
The unfortunate part about these larger vehicles is one, so let's say tandems, they're special licenses for the operators, which some of our maintenance staff, as an example, would not have. So, and then the second part of it is that these types of trucks are at the end of their service life. They're not like a pickup truck where you could maybe extend it a year if you took it out of service and put it into a less use department. Unfortunately, with these types of trucks, these are our front line, out in every weather. They're out every day, and they get worked. So to move them into another department is just basically moving the maintenance from public works, say, into PRT, and it's not a feasible option that I would recommend. Small pickups.
I was thinking something like the airport or something.
Yes, and the accession planning for something like that, yes, where a pickup truck with a plow on it could be moved into like the airport. That is in our plan to move one of the supervisors' plow trucks down to the airport when it comes time, or to move a pickup truck from say PRT from Public Works maybe into PRT for the Rangers to use as an example. We've done that in the past.
Okay. Thank you.
Deputy Mayor Danielson.
I just wanted the rest of council to know that our Public Works Department is, I think, right at the top of the heap when it comes to working, coordinating acquisitions, whether they be for projects or capital pieces of equipment. We do the most of that sort of consolidation and cooperation in the county. So kudos to Adam for that, and and to all of us for trying to make streamline things a little bit.
Yeah, thank you for that comment. So may I have, if there's no other questions, may I have a mover and a seconder for the pre-purchase as discussed? I see Councillor Barry and I see Councillor Shortreed.
Moved by Councillor Barry, seconded by Councillor Shortreed. Be it resolved that Council acknowledges receipt of Public Works Report PW 4620 regarding the purchase of 2 new single-axle cab and chassis trucks with plow equipment, submitted by Adam Thorne and dated October 1st, 2020, and that Council concurs with the recommendation made in the said report to tender the truck and plow equipment in 2020 with a 2021 delivery date, and that Council authorizes the payment of the 2 trucks and plow equipment to come from the 2021 Public Works Equipment Reserves.
All in favor? That is carried. Thank you. Same again, I think, Adam, for the backhoe pre-approval.
So very similar to the trucks. This is another piece of equipment that's coming to the end of its service life. And this one's a little more unique, is that I'm asking for pre-approval and single source. Over the course of the last quite a few years of purchasing equipment, we've kind of been all over the map on buying equipment, and just recently, as of 2018, we moved into a piece of equipment that is definitely held its own when it comes to what we put it through everyday use. This piece of equipment is just like the other piece of equipment, the truck. It is used on a daily basis. And one benefit I see to us continuing purchasing a Cat backhoe of this nature is that all of the parts and pieces that one machine has will fit on another machine we have. Currently, as the report reflects, with our case backhoe, we can't share tires. So we had to purchase a second set of rims as an example. Blades are a little bit different, parts are different. And I think you understand, it's like a Ford and a Chevy as an example. Some parts you can interchange, some you can't. One other benefit I see to this is that in 2018, 2019, surrounding municipalities and counties also purchased similar equipment from the same manufacturer. And we've seen a benefit in that if we have parts here in our shop and another machine's broken down in another municipality, the call comes to us, we can share those parts and then replenish them. So it reduces the downtime. Also, if we're having any issues with services or anything like that, not only is it a benefit and an efficient service for our supervisors to just deal with one manufacturer rather than multiple, it also allows us to share the travel time. If we can align, we do it a lot for ourselves, is that when someone comes to look at the backhoe to service it, we align it so they can do the excavator at the same time to save travel time. We can also align that with other municipalities. So it is definitely a benefit to purchase same equipment. Again, the parts is a big one too. If we need to interchange attachments. So currently right now we have to send a backhoe, say to Dorset, and the Dorset backhoe has to come to us when we want to sweep, do tandem sweeping or things of that nature. And that's where I see this being a huge efficiency for us.
Thank you for the details. I think there's, I'm glad that you expanded a little bit. I think there's tremendous, as the Deputy Mayor has mentioned, tremendous value in those collaborative efforts and the sharing, and just looking for ways to collaborate, find efficiencies, keep costs down is a great asset. So Council, Adam is looking for support not only for the pre-approval to purchase, but to single source it to accommodate the advantages and needs as outlined in the report. Thoughts, or do I have a mover and a seconder for it, or do you want to discuss it? Councillor Dayu?
Very much happy to support. I wonder if this is a bit of a hint or a trigger to maybe down the line look at our sole sourcing policy, whether there is a need there, and I put that to the CAO and certainly to Adam. Do our policies support sole sourcing when there's such an obvious need, such as making sure that everything is, of the same brand, so that you can share parts? I mean, that there are some really good reasons to sole source, and I just wonder, whether our policies are up to snuff in guiding us through that. Again, not a question necessarily for now, but is this conversation a bit of a trigger for looking at that down the line?
Well, we're allowed to do this because our policy says so, but the CAO can speak more to the details to clarify your particular questions. Angie, can you speak to that?
Sure. Our policy does have a specific section in it that speaks to sole sourcing. It allows us to do it in specific circumstances to, just as you've said, to when there are advantages to the municipality to make things the same for parts, like Adam has said. That is in our policy. It's intended next year for the Treasurer to review our purchasing policy to make sure that we are up to snuff, so to speak, in all those sections. But currently it does allow it.
Okay.
All right. Good to know that we're going to look at that, and because if there is room for tweaking, I mean, times change. So yeah, we'll look forward to what the Treasurer comes up with. Are there any other questions on this report? May I have a mover and a seconder to move it along? Deputy Mayor Danielson and Councillor Shortreed.
Moved by Deputy Mayor Danielson, seconded by Councillor Shortreed. Be it resolved that Council acknowledges receipt of Public Works Report PW 4720 regarding the 2013 case backhoe and attachment replacement pre-approval submitted by Adam Thorne and dated October 1st, 2020, and that Council concurs with the recommendation made in the said report for single source procurement of a 2021 CAT 420 XE backhoe with attachments, and that Council concurs with the recommendation made in the said report for pre-approval to purchase one new backhoe with attachments in 2020, and that Council concurs with the recommendation made in the said report to trade in the 2013 case backhoe to Tormont Cat at a value of $35,000 to $40,000, and further that Council authorizes this purchase to be funded from the Public Works Equipment Reserves in 2020.
All in favor of that? That is carried. Thank you, Adam, and you had a bunch of big reports, so thanks for your work on those.
Thank you.
Number 12, fire business is there's nothing this month. Finance business, I guess we need Jeannie to come in and talk about tax rate bylaw. Is she coming in, Angie? Yes, she is. Treasurer.
Yes, she is. Yeah.
And there she is. Good afternoon, Madam Treasurer.
Good afternoon, everyone.
You've got some words to speak to us about on the tax rate bylaw amendment.
Not a great deal of words. Basically, we passed our tax rate bylaw prior to COVID setting in, and then the EOC decided and agreed to change the due dates in lieu of the pandemic. And in doing so, we just really need to amend the bylaw to reflect the new due dates for the final taxes for this year. And notably, the pushed back due dates were also kind of in line, or basically in line with the education levies, as they did push them back or defer them until the fall. So they are kind of aligning with the education levies that are coming due at the end of the year.
Yeah, and we had a lot of conversation about this at the EOC, and a lot of municipalities, in consideration of folks who may have had employment challenges or making ends meet, made the deferral of dates, and but we didn't have a lot of uptake on it, did we, Jeannie?
No.
Which is good news. So, the tax revenues have remained steady right through. So, are there any questions on this? May I have a mover and a seconder to do this? Councillor Shortreed and Councillor Dayu.
Moved by Councillor Shortreed, seconded by Councillor Dayu. Be it resolved that Council receives Treasury Report TT 1320 submitted by Jean Hughes and dated October 1st, 2020, requesting an amendment to the 2020 tax rate bylaw, and that Council directs that a bylaw be tabled for further consideration.
All in favor? Scary, thank you. Thanks, Jean.
Thank you.
There's no planning business this time, and external boards again, all the way down to the bottom. Is there? I don't think there's anything from the library board. Madam Wardman, do you have anything exciting on EORN? Still status quo?
I wish I did, but it's still status quo.
Okay, correspondence. Did anything come forward, Madam Clerk?
Yes, I have two. One from the resolution from Wollaston, which is the voters list resolution, and also from Amherstburg for the accessibility.
I found the one from Wollaston quite interesting, and that people trying to get more ability to vote would present leases to their family members and say that they're therefore eligible to vote. And the CIO reminded me that had actually happened. It was around our runway issue. So yes, it actually had happened here, and I get that it's something that you can do, but it seems a bit untoward to me. So there is. Do you want to read that then?
Sure. Moved by Deputy Mayor Danielson, seconded by Councillor Berry. Be it resolved that Council supports Wollaston Township's resolution requesting the Minister of Municipal Affairs and Housing, the Honourable Steve Clark, to review the Municipal Elections Act and provide amendments to ensure any loopholes are closed on any pay and play schemes in rural communities where non-resident electors are permitted to participate in elections, to provide stronger and clearer wording to assist clerks to provide for a more definitive decision being made when adding names to the voters list, and to ensure there is a clear and accessible way to report voter fraud. And further, that a copy of this resolution be forwarded to Premier Doug Ford, Laurie Scott, MPP, Halbert Kawartha Lakes Brock, and Amo.
Any further discussion on that? All in favor? That's carried. And the second one is the ALDA extension.
Moved by Deputy Mayor Danielson, seconded by Councillor Barry. Whereas Section 14.4 of OREG 191.11 under the Accessibility for Ontarians with Disabilities Act requires designated public sector organizations to conform to WCAG 2.0 level AA by January 1, 2021. And whereas the declared pandemic COVID-19 has impacted the finances and other resources of the township, be it resolved that council supports the town of Amherstburg resolution requesting the province of Ontario extend the compliance deadline date stated in section 14.4 of OREG 191.11 to designated public sector organizations to meet the compliance standards by a minimum of 1 year to at least January 1, 2022, and respectfully request the province of Ontario consider providing funding support and training resources to meet these compliance standards. And further, that a copy of this resolution be forwarded to Premier Doug Ford, Laurie Scott, MPP, Halbert Kawartha Lakes Brock, and Amo.
Any further question or discussion? All in favor? That is carried. And I wonder too, I know we've got, having slowly ramping back up to business, we've got a lot on our plates. If we can, I'm not sure if Councillors Shortreed and Dayu, actually, we don't talk about the accessibility plan. Like, I think it comes once a year to council. Will it come in the new year, Angie? Or does it come every term? I can't quite remember.
Every year.
Every year. So when we'll see that in January?
I'd have to ask Dawn when that's coming.
Okay.
That's in her wheelhouse.
Okay, so then I said we need an accessibility plan update and it's coming anyway. So good. Okay, well, that concludes the open portion, I think. Oh, yes, ma'am.
We just need a mover and seconder to receive the correspondence listing.
Yes, we do. May I have a mover and a seconder to receive the correspondence list? Deputy Mayor Danielson and Lisa Berry, Councillor Berry.
Moved by Deputy Mayor Danielson, seconded by Councillor Barry. Be it resolved that council received the correspondence listings for the period of September 10th, 2020 to September 24th, 2020 for information.
All in favor? That's carried. And a mover and a seconder to move into closed session. Councillor Dayu and Deputy Mayor Danielson.
Could we have another 15-minute break between now and closed?
Yeah, I think we need 5 anyway. Remember, we're doing it a little bit differently this year, so you need to stay on your screen for a few minutes this week, or this time. Let me just defer to the tech experts here. What would you like us to do around that? We'll go into close and have a break. Okay. Yes, we will do that.
Are we calling in?
Nope.
Okay.
I'm sorry, is there a motion on the floor?
Yes.
All in favor?
No, I have to read
I haven't
it.
read it yet.
Oh.
It's so discombobulating when you have to have your lunch.
Moved by Councillor Dayu, seconded by Deputy Mayor Danielson. Be it resolved that council adjourns its open session at 1:04 p.m. in order to proceed into closed session to discuss personal matters about identifiable individuals, including municipal or local board employees, in accordance with Section 239(2)(b) of the Municipal Act 2001 SO 2001 as amended regarding a staffing update.
All in favor? That is carried. Okay, so when you see the screen go to closed session, then we'll just each take a quick break and then come back to your screen. Okay, we're back into open session. May I have a mover and a seconder to come out of closed session? Councillor Barry, Councillor Dayu.
Moved by Councillor Barry, seconded by Councillor Dayu. Be it resolved that the closed session of council is adjourned at 1:26 p.m. and open session resume.
Thank you. We're on to bylaws, and we have two. May I have a mover and a seconder for the bylaws? Councillor Shortreed, the CAO, wants to say, what am I doing wrong?
Oh, you didn't say carried.
Oh. I need some lunch. Carried. That motion's carried. Mover and a seconder for the bylaws. There were hands there. I think I had Councillor Shortreed and Deputy Mayor Danielson. Thank you.
Moved by Councillor Shortreed, seconded by Deputy Mayor Danielson. Be it resolved that the following bylaws be received and read a first time, read a second and third time, and finally passed with the corporate seal affixed. 2020-85, being a bylaw to authorize the mayor and clerk to sign a funding agreement between the Corporation of the Township of Algonquin Highlands and Her Majesty the Queen and Right of Ontario, as represented by the Minister of Natural Resources and Forestry, with respect to the Stewardship Youth Ranger Program. 2020-86, being a bylaw to authorize the levying or rates of taxation for 2020 to establish the due date for the payment of taxes and to provide for penalty and interest to be added to unpaid taxes.
All in favor? That's carried. May I have a mover and a seconder for the confirmatory bylaw? Deputy Mayor Danielson and Councillor Dayu.
Moved by Deputy Mayor Danielson, seconded by Councillor Dayu. Be it resolved that bylaw 2020-87, being a bylaw to confirm the proceedings of council held during its regular meeting on October 1st, 2020, be received and read a first time, considered read a second and third time, and finally passed with the corporate seal affixed.
All in favor? It's carried. And finally, adjournment. May I have a mover and a seconder for the adjournment of today's meeting? Deputy Mayor Danielson and Councillor Barry.
Moved by Deputy Mayor Danielson, seconded by Councillor Barry. Be it resolved that the October 1st, 2020 regular council meeting is hereby adjourned at 1:28 p.m.
All in favor? That's carried. Thank you. We are adjourned. Thanks, everybody, and thanks for everybody's effort. I think our discussion this morning was quite fruitful and sets the stage for lots more. So great.